speak or whatever.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's exciting edition of Victory Never Sleeps. Adjust my camera a little bit there. It's good to be on the show with you guys this week. Last week was strange for me. It's always strange when it's a fifth Wednesday of the month and we've got Brandy and the ladies on. It's odd to take a week off from the program. So it's good to be back. It's good to talk to you guys. I know the ladies did a good job last week, but I am excited to be back and spend the evening with you. Tonight, we will be covering the Fáfnismál, and it's another in the sequence of Eddic poems that relate to the Volsunga cycle. And so, yeah, this one's kind of cool. I think it's a little bit better put together than last week or than a couple of weeks back. Okay. So you guys can find your place while we're going over top of the show stuff. Voluspow.org. Nick has a link pulled up there. That's where we go over all of our Eddic stuff, and it's where we went over the Volsunga saga as well. Had we have thought about it, it's where we would have gone over Egil saga. So behold, go check it out. You can read along with us there, or as always, any translation or any copy of the Edda that you might have. Other top of the show stuff, as is seemingly always the case, we start off the show thanking G.W. Farnsworth for his tremendous generosity, a consistent and much appreciated donor to the program. Donated $25 to VNS and $25 to the Phrasehoff War Chest. So, it's a new month, and we have some very exciting things going on behind the scenes as far as making Phrasehoff happen goes. So hopefully I'll have cool things to tell you guys very soon. In the meantime, you guys have been tremendously generous. Our current total in the Phrasehoff War Chest is going to be $10,030.
Yep.
And we appreciate that very much. You guys have been awesome. You guys have been generous. That is 2 months and like 11 days worth of fundraising. We've been able to raise $10,000 for Phrasehoff. That is tremendous. You guys continue to amaze, and it's much appreciated. So that's how that's going, which, is very well. And we're very excited about it. Since last time I got to speak with you guys, we had Sigurd number 3 at Sigurdheim in Jackson County, Tennessee. It was a fantastic weekend. It was humid. It was sweaty, but it was a fantastic weekend. Wouldn't have traded it for anything. It was wonderful. I enjoyed. Thank you, everyone who came out and participated with us. It was tremendous. It is a truly magical place, and feel like Lord Tyr and the rest of the Aesir smiled upon us then and since. So I'm really appreciative of that, and hope you guys made it. We appreciate whatever level of participation you have with the AFA. If you're a member, I don't want to push you past what you'd like to do, but where the magic happens is when you get together with others of your folk to stand before the gods united as a folk in faith with your brothers and sisters of the AFA worshiping our gods together. And that's no place better expressed than at our Hoffs. If you guys can make it to your local Hoff, literally once a month at every one of our Hoffs, we do stuff. We would love to have you attend and show up. If you're a member, these are your Hoffs. You are welcome at all of them. We would love to have you there. If you're not a member, but you're thinking about it, absolutely check out the Hoff closest to you. Our Hoffs are Odin's Hoff in Brownsville, California. That's in Yuba County, California. Linden, North Carolina is the home to Thor's Hoff. Alder's Hoff is in Murdoch, Minnesota. And Njord's Hoff is in White Springs, Florida. So if you can make it to any of our Hoffs, please do. Please check them out. And it's a really good time to check out Baldur's Hoff. This month, we have Freyfaxi at Baldur's Hoff. It's the big event of Baldur's Hoff District. I pull out all the stops. It's going to be a very, very nice weekend. I'm going to be there. I would love to see all of you there. If you'd like to, it's going to be August 22nd through the 24th. Please reach out to your local folk builder, and we'd love to see you guys there, and they can help you make that happen. So let's do that. Also, wherever you are seeing this or hearing this, like, share, subscribe, comment, help us boost those algorithms. Word of mouth is how we grow, and it's very much appreciated. Also, if you listen to the show, you watch the show, and you are a heterosexual white person that wants to worship the gods of your ancestors, you should consider joining the Asatru Folk Assembly. The best time to have joined us is 30 years ago. The second best time is tomorrow. Or shoot, tonight. Why wait? Why put it off? Yeah. If you're on the fence, life is short. Get off the fence, join us. The perfect time, or the closest thing to the perfect time, is right now. We'd love to have you with us. We're doing amazing things. We'd love to be doing those things together. So please consider joining if, as I said, if you believe what we believe, you share our core values, and you're a heterosexual white person, this is where you ought to be. So come home to Asatru, come home to the Asatru Folk Assembly. That said, other announcements before we start the show. We've been talking about this for some time, and we went ahead and recognized three newly recognized Asatru heroes. The first one was Jarnskegja, which Ironbeard, who was a Norwegian local farmer and leader and freeman with holdings that was a leader in his community and a stalwart worshiper of Asatru. When Olaf Tryggvason was trying to rip our people away from troth to our gods with fire and sword, Jarnskegja and men in his company did their best to take a stand and to stay true to the Aesir. In an act of trickery, when the king and some of his retainers wanted to, let's participate in this festival you're doing. Show us into the Hof. We'll celebrate with you. They got into the Hof and ripped down the idol of Thor and begun desecrating the Hof. And Jarnskegja stood in defense and was cut down by Olaf and his men on the steps of the Hof, defending our gods. And for that and his loyalty in the face of death, we salute him and we honor him henceforth with a day of remembrance. And I got to check the calendar now. I want to say May the 5th is his day of remembrance.
May the 9th.
May the 9th. Okay, that's why I had the 5 in my head. I'm sorry, I apologize. Yes, May the 9th. Also, two people that, much to my shame, I had never heard of until very recently, but also worthy of celebrating as Asatru heroes and recognizing. Two Swedes from the 15th century, which is
way after the Viking Age.
Yeah, it's a special time for us to honor practitioners of our faith. At this time, the formal practice of our religion had died out, and you had these, individuals that were called to the gods that sought out relationship with them and worship of them in, small, isolated, maybe families, maybe real small group of friends, maybe just as individuals reaching out to the gods and the gods reaching back. Both of these men were devoted and admitted openly on pain of death that they were devoted to the Allfather Odin, and they were his men. Those two men are Eirik Karlsson. Clausen. Eirik Clausen, and he'll be honored on June the 13th each year. And Ragnvald Odiakarl. And Ragnvald was at his trial before his execution. He said that he had been a follower of Odin for 7 years at that time. So we don't know a great deal about either of those two men, but what we do know is that when on trial in the face of certain death at the stake, they both stood firm that they were followers of Odin and unrepentant Asatru. And as such, they met their death in the flames. So at a time where very few were doing it, and it was certainly not a popular thing to do, these two men stood loyal to the Allfather unto their death. That's the top of the show things I have today. As always, our shows are heavily, question and answer driven. So if you have questions, please ask them. We will be sure to answer all questions that come our way. Also, if you ever have a question for the show at any point in time, you can email those to us, and we will answer them on the next show. We have a couple of people who do that. We have some randoms, and we have some that regularly send questions there. We appreciate them. That's at vns@runestone.org. vns@runestone.org. That is what we've got to start off with. Is there anything that folks should know to prepare for tonight's episode and for diving into the Fáfnismál?
Yes, I would say just giving perspective. It's not something that you need to know specifically about the piece. Think of it like this. The Volsunga saga talks about the slaying of the dragon in its entirety, but it doesn't go into detail. However, these three poems are the detailed of that specific moment. So obviously I missed Reginsmál because I was actually in another state, and that was a big snafu on my part. Very disjointed poem that's in the Codex Regis, and it doesn't follow, or it follows the old meter, but it's very, very choppy. This one is far more complete, and it follows a very typical Old Norse style of poetry where two forces meet and then they have a lore exchange. So this is the exchange between Sigurd and the dragon. He slays the dragon, and in the dragon's dying breath, or excuse me, as he's dying, I should say, he exchanges wisdom. This is for the poet. This is also for the audience. And then we'll move into the next poem, which is of the three that kind of focus specifically on this spot. So that's it. That's all you have to really know about it, is that it's a hyper focusing on the timeline of Sigurd at the slaying of Fafnir.
All right. Well, Svan, with that, would you like to take us into the text?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so it does start with an introduction, and there is also some interesting points. So I was mistaken on something. The G sound, like in whether it's Regis or Regis, the G sound has a tendency to cause confusion. And as it currently, by my studying, the G sound, like in the word Nipa, or here in the beginning, it says Nita Heath. I would normally silence the G, but I've come to understand that it was actually pronounced. So it would be Genita Heath.
G's funny because it makes almost a silent sound depending on where it's at. Sometimes it makes a G noise. It often makes a hard K noise.
Yes,
So-
like in Rackenwald, or how it's spelled is rag with a G. And I saw that I heard that you did that, and I was like, yeah, this is kind of a point I wanted to make about language and studying languages and attempting to pronounce and looking at modern Icelandic versus Old Norse creates these misnomers. And
yeah, the and in Icelandic and Old Norse, it's funny because it's depending on the age and the text, it's interchangeably OG or OK.
Yeah, or
either translates and is acceptable. I tend to find that the was it OK often in the Old Norse and OG in modern Icelandic, but making
OG is
the exact same noise.
Yeah, and it's an understanding that, and we spoke about this on VNS about the sagas, when Simundur was writing down the stories from poets in the oral tradition, he wrote it in Latin. And the reason why he did that is because at the time, Nordic culture was trying to figure out whether or not it was going to continue writing in runic or utilizing Latin letters. And there are some works written during that time in Younger Futhark. So that's a really cool time that was kind of happening. But eventually, no, you're going to do Latin letters. And then it was about which Latin letters would be utilized in certain ways. And so there's this evolution of language. And as Central European languages were affected by Latin, it so too affected the Norse and the Norwegian and the Danes. So there's a constant shift, I think, of language. So that makes it difficult as well. And so for any people that are having problems with pronunciation, or anyone who kind of goes in and says, well, no, it's not pronounced that way, you have to give people leeway. There's an absolute valid reason why a lot of folks get things wrong. It's okay. And we're, as we go, we are learning more and more and going from there. But so we have and I want to do it right now. Regin, or Regin, as I would call him. So we have Regin, and he is the smith that forges Sigurd's sword back together, his father's sword. And Sigurd, this was the scene where he grabs the sword and he hits it against an anvil and it breaks, the sword breaks. And then he says, forge it again, and he forges it again. And then he hits the anvil and it breaks. And he says, forge it again. And then the third time, of course, he hits it and splits the anvil in twain. So he and Regin form this relationship. And Regin is secretly malicious. He wants the treasure of his brother Fafnir, who can shape change and has shape changed into a dragon. So he wants this treasure, and now he finds someone who is perhaps youthful, dumb in his opinion, or if he fails, it's no loss to him, and then he can try some other way. That's absolutely how he is painted in this, but poetic measure doesn't give a lot for hidden meanings. So bear that in mind. As we go here, Regin is going to lead Sigurd to the cave where Fafnir is. And he knows exactly how to strike the dragon. Sigurd says, I don't know what I've never fought a dragon before. I don't know exactly what to do. And Regin's like, no, you're going to dig a pit and he's going to come down for water and you're going to hit him then. So he had known this and was already, or perhaps, I don't know, but it's never mentioned, but perhaps he's tried this before with other warriors. So ultimately, before we even start, it's worth noting Regin and Sigurd are friends, but Regin is secretly deceptive, ultimately wanting to kill Sigurd. And the way he's going to do that is he's going to consume the blood of the dragon, which will give him superpower so then he can kill the hero. And Fafnir is the dragon who, again, it's never specified that, or it's always a general understanding that Fafnir and Regin are people, humans, but they have connections to the dwarves and obviously shape-changing magic, etc. So they are also two akin of an extraordinary beings, but they're never mentioned as simply being like they're witches or warlocks.
This is a strange kind of note. This exists in a kind of quasi-mythical time period where things have that golden age element to it, to where the gods are walking by, hanging out with these beings and wrong them, and then are called to account like, hey, you owe us because you killed our brother who was shaped like an otter, and these strange things, to where they're conceived of as people in the way that they're interacting, but they also interact with the divine like they're on much more of a level of parity with them. You see that when Odin is in the story, he very much, there's this is, a god and not just some dude. But not so much when he and Loki and Thor are dealing with the family of Regin and Fafnir and Otter. So they're in this strange, maybe they're dwarves, maybe there's some kind of other demigod kind of things. They do clearly have the ability to alter their shape or their hammer. So don't get hung up. This is a time where the realm of men and gods and the other world interact in a more seamless way than they do at present. And while I got the floor, something else worth noting before we get into the text, which we'll get in here in just a second. Ronald Blake donated $25 to the South Africa Fund. Thank you so much. And he also bought us 5 copies, which is an additional $25. Thank you. We appreciate you. We appreciate everybody who's been so generous to us.
All right. So we set in. Sigurd and Regin went up to Nita Heath. Now it's worth remembering Nita is kind of the ride. It's almost like a heath on a plateau, but ultimately it's a barren place. It's seen as a more or almost as if. I would think if this was done continentally, it would be very similar to lowland Germans going into the Danish area, but that the land was at a rise and then, went into a marsh, more water swamp area. And they go there, and there they found the track of Fafnir, made when he crawled to the water. Then Sigurd made a great trench across the path and took his place therein. When Fafnir crawled from his gold, he blew out venom, and it ran down from above Sigurd's head. But when Fafnir crawled over the trench, then Sigurd thrust his sword into the body and straight to the heart of Fafnir. Fafnir writhed and struck out with his head and tail. Sigurd leaped out of the trench, and each looked at the other. And Fafnir said, so this, you don't hear this in the Volsunga saga. This is going into detail in a moment, and I think that's really amazing. It's also worth noting that with Regin and Fafnismál, there is no indication that this is a different poem. It just keeps going, but the styles are completely different. And that's what makes scholars believe that these are two separate poems could join together, obviously, because of their time in the story. So Fafnir says, youth, O youth, of whom then youth art thou born? Say whose son thou art, who in Fafnir's blood thy bright blade reddened and struck thy sword to my heart. Sigurd conceals his name because it was believed in olden times that the word of a dying man might have great power if he cursed his foe by his name. That's actually written in the poem. So he says instead, the noble heart, my name, and I go, a motherless man abroad. Father I had not as others have, and lonely ever I live. Fafnir speaks, if father thou hadst not, as others have, by what wonder wast thou born? Though thy name on day of my death thou hidest, thou knowest now thou dost lie. So he knows immediately that Sigurd is being deceptive, that he's hiding his name, because none can be born without father, without mother. Not even the gods. The mortal world is a reflection of the divine world. And so we see the dragon knows immediately that he's speaking of unnaturalness, and
this is all right, guys. We have some of these poems here that Svan and I are going to cover this week and in the coming weeks. Some of them are short. We may lump some together. We may do them all individually, but we are going to take a little bit of liberties on going on little side paths when they come up. This, I think, is a point of really interesting value that comes to us. That there is power in naming something. And also that there is enhanced power in and taboos around last words, the last requests, or the utterances of someone in the throes of death. And so I guess last part first. At the moment of death, a couple of really interesting things are occurring. Your soul is in a flux between this world and the next, and you occupy a a special place in the matrix between worlds. Also, our speech in our regular life is very much conditioned by the restraints of the conscious mind, by all of the expectations and things that we know, by all of our hesitancies about being embarrassed or about saying the wrong thing or about pretense, all of the different governors on our speech and our action that restrict them in a certain way. And when we talk about the numinous or the metaphysical or the magical, being in a sober and completely straight place when you're talking has a lot of governors that get in the way of magical efficacy. There's something that's channeled, and this is why so many magical things come from the primal, they come from the state, they come from often the lower, and they come in strange ways or through strange ritual. They come from a deeper part of yourself, or a lot of the power comes from a deeper part of yourself. There's something that I think fundamentally we know to be true. Women tend to be motivated by more of those primal or alchemically liquid places. They tend to embody those things in a different way. And I think it's one of the reasons that our ancestors, that it's one of the reasons that women tend to be more associated with that kind of primal magical efficacy. I think it's a reason that our ancestors listen to them in a special way, where sometimes their counsel on logical or tactical things is different, but their counsel on primal, magical, otherworldly things tends to be more keen oftentimes than men's, or certainly more easy to access. There's something, all of these things sound disjointed. I promise there's a method to my madness, even if they seem random, because I'm looping a lot of things together. Before we develop all of our cognitive hue and thought process on everything, we communicate a lot more instinctively. There's a reason that like little kids and animals see haints better than adults and rational grown people, because they don't have the same restrictions. And if you'll indulge me one more, and I'm putting it out there, no offense to the developmentally delayed, but it's also part of retard strength. There's something that happens when you don't have the preconception of what you're supposed to be able to do, and you just do, that you're able to access a reservoir of power that's much greater, because it's not conditioned. You don't have the governors on it. You have no idea what you're supposed to be able to lift. You just go and you do what you do, because maybe you're mad, or maybe you're excited, or whatever, and see what happens. There's something to that. So when you find yourself intoxicated, when you find yourself in agony, or in some kind of an altered state, or at these moments where you're straddling the line between life and death, your connection between that center of power is much less encumbered. And I think that we, culturally, what I think has stayed with us, besides, the magic of it all, we all understand there's something special about a last request, or about somebody getting to say final words, somebody who's dying getting to have that last burst of will being expressed in Midgard is something we all recognize as having a potency. Also, depending upon what they're going through in that dying process, them summoning up the raw will to express themselves is often such a guttural digging deep into the ur self or the primal strength to get it out. It has a potency to it. So there's something magically expressive about that. Also, names mean stuff. They're not just convenient ways for us to differentiate or communicate. There's power in a name. It's why one of our big foundational ceremonies in Asatru, the Ausavatni, has all that sprinkling of water to affix a name to something makes a difference. Naming a weapon, naming a ship, naming something makes it not just a thing, but it makes it have a soul. Now, when I say that, it doesn't make it have all of the components that make a human soul, unless you are naming a child, but it makes it something other. It separates it from, this penny, that penny. Oh, I've got my pile of swords. Let me grab one. Those are all swords, but I wield relentless. There is something different and other that makes it a storehouse of energy for good or for bad, of luck for good or for bad. Same with a person. It's why I think it is very important, and I try to make this point often at Symbol. Speak the name of your ancestor. I remember, if I may, and I'm going to anyways, first Symbol I was at was Svan at Winter Nights. He was trying to raise a horn to, I think, both of his Icelandic grandparents. But their names didn't come naturally to an English speaker's tongue. They were difficult to get. So it was kind of getting brushed by as, people just kind of, hail. I mean, people were making the effort to say the name, but I stopped and I said, no, how do you say their names? Because I wanted to say them out loud, because that has a magical potency much more than hail grandma, hail Svan's grandma. Nice gesture, and I don't think it's worthless, but I think it is greatly enhanced when you use a name. Our ancestors believed this. That's why you don't want to give people your name, because then they can direct energy at you in a special way. Then they can curse you or whatever they're going to do. Speaking a name, I realize that the stuff, even as I'm saying it, I realize how much nonsense this might sound like. I promise the thought process makes more sense. I hope some of it clicks to you. It's really hard to express these things in a way that's easily accessible. But when you speak generally, you take a thought or an intention and you manifest it in the world in a different way. Now it's no longer something you're thinking or something you're like projecting in your head. You are vocalizing it. Other people can hear it. The gods can hear it. It's spoken into the world. When you further speak it and direct it with specificity at a name, it also has more power. And so all of these different little concepts of magic and of sending, be it blessing, curse, spell, incantation, are in this couplet of lines that I think, if nothing else, makes this poem a valuable thing for us to read. It certainly, I probably read this poem for the first time in 2002. But this exact sequence has always stuck out to me because it is so important for that. And it is rung true to me. It rang true to me almost exactly a year ago, just a little bit more a year ago, when my friend Gothi Thorgren passed. It was one of those processes of dying where he was very out of it and on morphine to ease his passing. And it was one of those, we're just going to wait and let him slip away, but he's dying. And when I got there to visit him that last time, he summoned this uncanny and very special, like he was way out of it. But when his wife informed him that I was there, something came over him to where all of a sudden, he was limp. He was just zoned out of his mind with the different processes of dying and the morphine. All of a sudden, he gripped my hand with, a firm, manly grip, got clear-eyed, looked me straight in the face, and he told me something. And then he went back into that in-between space that he was and proceeded with his process of dying. That'll stick out with me for the rest of my life. And it was encouragement and compliment, but it was deeply, deeply meaningful. And it's this same thing, but the Leostav version. But there's a power in those kind of last words that someone speaks on their deathbed. Carry on. We've made it like 5 times.
Yeah, you kind of dropped it. It's like, yeesh, it is a very powerful subject that people don't think about. That the attaching of the name, the completion of the soul, the introduction into the folk. And matter of fact, the next part of it kind of lends to that. And we have been so far removed from the significance of it by Christianity and then modernization, the abstraction of the divine, that our gods are, and everything you spoke of has purpose, name, significance. Then it's replaced with a Semitic god, and that God is no longer Yahweh, it's Jehovah, but it's not Jehovah, it's God. And eventually God is just an amorphous blob. And now, even the rules that this thing has set are starting to get all grayed. And
something funny on that I'd heard it before, but I don't remember where I ran into it, but it was today or yesterday. The bear was such a potent totem to invoke amongst our folk in antiquity that they stopped calling it whatever they called it and just called it, bear, which meant like brown one, because they didn't want to say its name lest they invoke its, terrible presence. So the original name for what they called bear was lost to us.
And they replaced it with the Lion of Judah. The lion became the new symbol for European royalty. Mm-hmm. And the level of that kind of switch over is pretty sad and disgusting sometimes. I think about our heroes that I think we were talking about this at the Hoff is, for some folks to not understand how to bloat. I said, the first thing I would say is your ancestors, but also bloat to our heroes for their sacrifices, read about them, learn about them, open up a relationship to them and give them honor. And when I read the stories of the heroes, and even the two that you mentioned that were in the 14th century, dying for the Aesir, it's just the cravenness of the usury and all of the trickery that was done and all of the backstabbing. And Olaf Tryggvason was at least, he was still a Norseman, so there was a lot of upfront violence there, but there was also this trickery of sneaking into the Hof or waiting for people to hold the festival and then showing up and stealing all of their stuff. Just absolute. Ugh. But as that's the start of our disconnection with significance. And so I think ultimately everybody here should know the reason why you and I go off on these tangents is to reestablish significance, to give context and create the genuine. It's not just a mental note, but it's also a physical note towards why things are important as they are. And I think that's ultimately what we've been doing. Perhaps it's never been expressed, but it should be expressed, is that that's why we're reading these poems, is to make those reconnections. And
I mean, that's a thing, that the lore is cool. Like, in and of itself, it's neat to know the stories. That layer is important and inspirational and educational and fun and just awesome. Learning the stories of our ancestors is a really special thing in its own right. But the reason it's lore and not just cool history or not just cool stories is that it's pregnant with all of these different bits of things that have meaning and connection and deeper application. And so when Svan and I notice those, we try to highlight them and bring attention to them. And hopefully that's useful to the audience.
well, so Fafnir the dragon, and it never states that he returns to his original shape, whatever that's not even specified exactly. So he's in dragon form and he says, "What is your name? Who are you? The one that slayed me?" And again, the image of the noble hart, the deer, Hart, in English, hart is a deer, and deor meant any wild animal, but that eventually fell out of use. But again, anyone who's familiar with European Christian ideologies or iconography of like the white deer or the deer with the cross or the light above its head, that doesn't come from Christianity. That comes from before. And he says it with a intended purpose. I am the noble heart. And then, of course, Fafnir looks at him side-eyed and says, "No, I know you're lying." So once he's cornered out of the lie and the deception, Sigurd drops it, because there's no point in maintaining the ruse with such a observant and cunning enemy. So he goes all in. So Sigurd says, "My race, methinks, is unknown to thee, and so am I myself. Sigurd, my name, and Sigmund's son, who smote thee thus with the sword." So imagine this youth. He's very, very young. 15 was like the average age that a man would go on his first trading or raiding trip. So I could be around in here. But there's another part here. He says, "My race." This is a translation. Anybody that's used to the runes will know that the runes are separated into three groups called the Aitir. The Aitir are family, and the translation of "my race" could probably be misinterpreted by people trying to add presentism, but the word in Old Norse is Aiturni, which means my family, my lineage. He's saying, I don't think you know the lineage, and what he's really saying is the Volsungs. You don't know of my people, but I am myself, and I am the son of Sigmund. So he is Sigurd Sigmundsson, and that establishes the truth of it. And then Fafnir speaks again, as after he says, "I smote you with this sword." Fafnir speaks and says, "Who drove thee on?" Why wert thou driven my life to make me lose? A father brave had the bright-eyed youth, for bold in boyhood thou art. My heart did drive me, my hand fulfilled, and my shining sword so sharp. Few are keen when old age comes, who timid in boyhood be. So he said, few keen edges are sharpened when by old warriors when they are weak and easy to bend when they're younger. So bravery and boldness.
If you didn't have it when you were a young man, you're not going to have it when you're an old timer.
Right. It's that inherentness of it. So he's really like shining right now. I mean, he just slayed a dragon. So I could see it. And he is I started a sketch of the dying dragon with this young lad kind of just very cocky with his hand on his hip and his arm on the sword having conversation because he was able to do it. And Fafnir spoke, if thou mightiest grow, thy friends among, one might see thee fiercely fight, but bound thou art and in battle taken, and to fear are prisoners prone. So he's suggesting that Sigurd is sent forth out of being obligated or being held in bondage. And what that means too is whether it's oath bonding or that he is somehow kind of being put to it. And Sigurd says, thou blamest me, Fafnir, that I see from afar the wealth that my father's was. Not bound am I, though in battle taken, thou hast found that free I live. In all that I say dost thou hatred see, yet truth alone do I tell. The sounding gold, the glow red wealth, and the rings thy bane shall be. So now he lays the warning out about the treasure, which again is not emphasized in the Volsunga saga. It's not the element of the curse isn't really there. It is in full form here.
Don't be mistaken. The Volsunga saga is the oldest full narration and full in quotation marks narration of the story that we have. If it's expanded on and developed in a different way in the Nibelungenlied, which maybe if we're feeling froggy, we'll do at some point. But none of that's the original source. This is a very old and well understood cycle of poetic understanding. So it's cool to not only read the Volsunga saga to where we have the broad strokes of the story, but these bits of poetry flesh out the tale a little bit more. The curse of the Rheingeld is talked about here, and it's expanded upon greatly in the Nibelungenlied, but it's not, as Svan mentioned in the Volsunga saga. So there's little bits and pieces that we learn here that add a lot of depth to the story that we already went over. But while I have you, if Nick would put it up, Svan and I were talking about the bear imagery of old Europe. That's really cool. And for a fun aside, I would recommend the following book. I think it's really cool. I read it a number of years ago. I got a lot out of it. And I think it's covers something that folks are not typically very familiar with. So Bear, History of a Fallen King. And sorry to pull it up on my phone to try to get the Arthur here. Hold on for a sec. I apologize. Should have been a little bit more prepared. There's the cool picture by Michael something, but it's too small for me to read.
Pastoro.
Michael Pastoro, The Bear, History of a Fallen King. You will notice the imagery looks very similar to the Thorshof bear. But yeah, it's a really cool book. It's obscure. I don't know who originally turned me on to it, but feel like I read that in 2014, 2015. And yeah, it's a cool book and it's neat. And it's something that I don't think you're going to encounter in the same way, at least in the same depth otherwise. So I would recommend folks read that.
Definitely not the first time we've talked about it on VNS, because I've had it in my Amazon wish list for quite a while.
Oh, and somebody made a good comment in the chat about King Arthur being something that comes to mind when talking about mentioning bears, and that goes into his name, and that's absolutely a thing. So Arthur. Good point and prescient to mention.
Yeah,
carry on.
Yeah, finding these significances of our ancestors in dichotomy, it doesn't mean we reject some of the good things that Christianity did in unifying our people and moving us forward, but it also allows us to identify and reconnect our significances. All right, so he speaks and says, "It's the bane it shall be of thee." And Sigurd speaks, "Someone the hoard shall ever hold, till the destined day shall come. For a time there is when every man shall journey hence to hell." And it's written with the double L's, but in the Old Norse it is not. It is Heljar, the land beyond the veil, the underworld, the shaded land of death, which we have all, in these poems, of the synonymousness with hell, not just the Austvanir, but the name itself in the poetry was synonymous with death. Most likely 12th century, 13th century, it meant death, or the best way to describe it would be to say to someone like, "Oh, we're going to send these bastards to hell." That means we're going to kill them all. So there is this kind of flux there, but I just thought it was interesting that they used the double hockey sticks, if you will. Okay. But so Fafnir retorts, and he says, "The fate of the Norns before the headland thou findest, and doom of a fool. In the water shalt drown if thou row 'gainst the wind. All danger is near to death." So he's saying that the fate of one is woven by their deeds, and that a sailor who makes folly is fated to drown. A rider who makes folly is fated to fall. A warrior who makes folly is fated to be struck. He's basically saying that the deeds that we weave to find ourselves in the places we are oftentimes reach us when we, they take that folly. That's the one time you didn't check the corner, the one time you just didn't quite do what you were supposed to do, and you slip up, or there's that, just the chance of that. But all danger is near to death. So living a life cushy or hid away was absolutely seen as kind of an avoidance, but also the greatest loss, because without the risk, there was no reward. And Sigurd speaks back. "Tell me then, Fafnir, for wise thou art famed, and much thou knowest now. Who are the Norns? Who are helpful in need, and babe and the babe from the mother bring? Of many births the Norns must be, nor one in race they are. Some to gods, others to elves, are kin and Dvalin's daughters, some. Now, this might confuse a lot of people because they're thinking the Nornir, the witches, are the Nornir that we speak most of. But it is worth noting that the word Nornir and Disir are very intertwined, especially in their meaning. And what he's referring to is the holders of fate, the twisters of fate. This is the exact reason why Holy Freya is called Avana Dis. She's the Disir, or the Nornir of the Vanir. And Valkyries are often referred to as Disir or Norn. They have the ability to interject into the moment of someone's fate, or they are there at the most important part, which is at the end. It's a great sense of mystical power.
So, linguistic point about Norns. Norn is cognate to witch, but not in like a wart on the nose flying around on a broomstick mutation of it. But that, we've been over this a couple of times, but in our lore, there are these broad terms that there's like the Nornir, the big three, Earth, Verdandi, and Skuld, that we're all very aware of. But then there's a variety of other Nornir. There is the concept of, little n Nornir, as it were, generally with people as Nornir, also with Dis. Dis means goddess. It also means priestess. It means both of those things, which is really interesting. All of, the female Vanir are Disir in the sense that they're goddesses, but Freya is the Vanadis with a big D, I guess. So I realized what I just said. I apologize. That's not what I was going for. But yes. So we have these overlapping terms. It's just like when we talk about the Jotnar, there are a lot of different varieties of what that means depending on the context that it's used. Something else I wanted to mention too a little bit with that. It's interesting that when we see these elements of our lore, you think of a dragon as being physically potent. You think of a giant as being physically potent, which certainly they are. But both of these kind of creatures speak to a deep age, a deep wisdom, a wisdom in language, a wisdom in magic and spellcraft that makes them particularly potent, not just physically imposing, but imposing in their arcane wisdom. And I think that's something that, a lot, maybe the casual participant may not be familiar with or may not think about.
So, well, in this part too, he says, who are the Norns who are helpful in need, and the babe from the mother bring? There's the idea of either the physical doula or midwife, which in that stanza alone, my youngest son was brought into the world here at our home with 3 women, definitely lowercase n Nornir. One was older, one was in the middle, and one was younger. It was very, very mythical, even though it could be simply just skewed as the mundane. But it's noted here, he says, and and the babe from the mother bring. The Nornir are associated with, even in a good light, that they are asked in need. Now, is this the lowercase or the large, the capital N?
Either way, you call in, the wise old women of your tribe to help with childbirth, in a home birth situation, in a rural situation today, in any situation at this time. But we also make offerings to the Nornir when a baby's born, and when we do a naming. In both senses, there's a relevance there.
Well, and he states too, it is not amongst one family or group of gods. The gods have them, the elves have them, and Dvalin's daughters, which is a kenning for the Svartalf, the swarthy elves, or the Dvergar of the earth. And then he retorts back, Sigurd says, well, tell me, Fafnir, for wise thou art famed, and much thou knowest now. How call they the isle where all the gods and Surt shall sword sweat mingle? Sword sweat, of course, meaning the gripping of a handle, battle against each other, or the sword sweat also being blood. So where will they battle? And Fafnir says it's Oskopnir. Is it where all the gods shall seek the play of swords? Bilrost breaks when they cross the bridge, and the steeds shall swim in the floods. Now, Bilrost generally is viewed as a type of Bivrost, the bridge. Though some have argued that it is another name, or not another name, but like a poetic name, as there are, perhaps like multiple names of Yggdrasil, and Yggdrasil itself is a poetic name. So there's kind of a toss-up on that, but he means Bivrost. So he says, Oskopnir is where the gods shall play with swords, and Bifrost will break when they cross the bridge, and the steeds shall swim in the flood. Fafnir, did I miss that, or did that go? We are on 15, correct? Okay, so 16 goes in continuation to what Fafnir said. The fear helm I wore to affright mankind, while guarding my gold I lay. Mightier seemed I than any man, for a fiercer never have I found. So he's speaking about the helm of fear. Many people might know this in the later Viking age with the symbol of the helm of awe, or the helm of terror, as a symbol.
Nick, can you find that for us, please? And thank you.
Yeah, the helm of terror, the helm of awe, is utilized a lot in regarding the Viking age, but it's technically incorrect. It's not in the Viking age. It follows after. However, it does have connection linguistically and most certainly by item in what Fafnir is referring to here.
Flag on display. Whoa, so that's really hard to see because it's in black and it's overlaid on us. But yeah, if everybody can see that, it's a really common thing that I'm sure everybody's seen, something that I would like to say. And you may have heard me say this on here before. Ansus is not a vertical line with 2 diagonals coming off of it. Ansu's is the mystery of the Aesir as they speak existence into being. It is personified, it is embodied in the picture of a vertical line with two downward diagonals coming from it. The Helm of Awe is absolutely a Viking Age and a Golden Age thing. The Augusthjálmur, as depicted as the snowflake design that you see before you, is a medieval sigil, but it is a sigil for the spell that we are talking about in this antiquity that we're speaking of. When we're talking about any kind of sigil magic, be it this or be it the runes themselves, it's important that any of us can draw stick figures. It doesn't make them magically empowered. They become magically empowered when we so there's probably some really cool, spooky Vit keywords for this stuff that I don't possess. But there's something to be said when you talk about rune magic. People carve runes all the time for writing stuff. But there's something when you read about knowing how to carve them and then knowing how to redden them with blood. There's different things you do to, I don't know, to charge them, to awaken the magical efficacy within the symbols. But again, you are calling upon a concept or a spell or something from the ether, and you are birthing it into Midgard in a variety of forms, one of which is these magical sigils that we see as the runes or that we see as the Augusthjálmur in the snowflake design. But I think it's important when people are like, aha, gotcha, that's not a Viking thing. The picture might very well not be. But the concept and the spell that it embodies absolutely is. So it's really important to be able to, and just as Svan loves the tripartite, our law speaker loves the term bifurcate. We need to bifurcate the concept of the symbol from the mystery that the symbol represents. And like many things I've said tonight, it may sound ridiculous. It may not make much sense right now. I hope some people are tracking, and I hope it is useful to some folks. And it makes sense in my head if that holds any value.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to say, is that there are people that will come on the internet and say, oh, it was a medieval talismanic. No, there's clearly connections that go further back. And this the symbology of it morphs as our people went forward. Also, I wanted to say to Witchmaster in the comments, yeah, we were talking about the Norns with the capital N as, of course, the Nornir, the past, the present, the future, or the more correctly would be the past, present, and that which is indebted by your deeds. Skuld. But we were also talking, the reason why he says not one race are they amongst is because he's speaking that even the dwarves, even the elves, and the gods themselves, by the mighty three, contain these wise women, these twisters of fate. It's just, if you read lore and you see kind of a lower case Nornir, it may cause some confusion. A lot of people think or can't differentiate all of that. So that's really why we're bringing that up. But here we see he speaks of the helmet, and he speaks of the fear helm. The specified way that people look at this when they read it is that it is a helm, an actual helmet. And that's because of translations. It is looking at the story and wondering, is the dragon a man? Does he wear a helmet, or is the dragon a dragon.
Svan, I have a question. Is where we get a lot of those symbols, is that the Galdrabok?
Yes, the Galdrabok was a compilation of sigils.
A lot of the sigils in there are like, you would put them subtly on something, or you would carve them. There's a couple of them that were cool that were for wrestling, and you'd put them at different parts, like on your shoe or in your shoe. Yep. You'd have one like on your heel and one like on the ball of your foot for the Glima, like wrestling runes. So, I mean, the way this reads, he could put on a helmet, but then does the helmet change shape when he becomes a dragon, or when he's a guy, or how does that work?
Right.
Or it could simply be something, a talisman or a thing that is carved into or drawn upon or worn upon his head.
Right.
Or it could be something that slipped inside of a helmet, like some of those spells would be things you'd put inside your hat, just like you'd put something inside your shoes. So there's probably a lot of different ways you could imagine this. I don't know that one's better than the other.
Yeah, and Jilly just brought up a great point. She thought it meant the helm of a ship, like the steering, the wheel of a ship. No, those were.
I was gonna say, that's cool. I don't know if that
cool.
Linguistically, I don't know if that word had meaning in that context in that time.
Yeah, in technology, they didn't have that yet.
Well, I'm saying, but did that word mean something else and it evolved to be the steering wheel, which ironically looks like the symbol? But like, are you still a helmsman if you're the guy that's manning the rudder? Or I'm not sure how that works in naval stuff. Svan, being a Marine, I'm going to call on you to know.
I was only familiar with one area, and that's the berthing or the gym. They kept us locked in the bottom of the ship.
To break down the word, Hjalmar means helm or helmet. Right. Specifically, Hjalmbarth is the brim of a helmet, so it's Hjalm is helmet, and Aegis, the first part is literally Greek. I don't know how it got to an Icelandic word. It's Greek. It means shield.
Well, that might be,
or I'm assuming it is, because Aegis is Greek for shield.
Yeah, that might be a translational thing that you're reading.
Also, keep in mind, Greek and Old Norse have similar roots.
They're both
sometimes you find things that manage to hold on or even have different meanings, but keep similar spellings in different branches.
Yeah, specifically the Aegis it's a piece of cloth, and in other myths, a shield, animal skin that was carried by Athena and Zeus, sometimes featuring the head of a gorgon.
Well, so when you're translating Old Norse and when you're translating Anglo-Saxon, you'll notice that there are quite a lot of loan words that probably came in before Christianity. But it's worth noting that the idea of a shield or the roundness, again, as Sigurd was saying, a symbol placed upon the head or of the dragon or an actual helm. That's kind of where I was going with this initially, but it all lends to what was written in the Galdrabok is often scoffed at as being, Christian hermetic magic. It's not the real. It's not based on anything our ancestors did. There's this internet movement to try to disconnect, but nothing comes out of a vacuum. There is linked points that show us this drawing of perhaps the way that it was drawn has changed. Certainly symbols do that. We see that with every Futhark. But I don't think it's right for us to disconnect and say, well, that's, certainly not of the Viking age by time, but it is not somehow separated or an interloping thing like hermetic magic from medieval times, etc., that a lot of people try to do in order to kind of ultimately just try to get power over people. But no, he says that he wore the helm.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt, Swan. On the etymology, what I'm finding on Aius is it comes from, it's the indefinite genitive singular of Aegir, as in the husband of Ram.
Oh, see, again, they're focusing in on that. And the title of Aegir, as all the gods have titles, the Furious One, etc. I was always of understanding that it was like the flat plane or the flatness. Like I could understand how it might be associated with a shield, but it was also just the no land in sight, if you will, flatness. But he says to Sigurd, I wore this helm to ward off everyone. And Sigurd speaks, he says, the fear helm, surely no man shields when he faces a valiant foe. Oft one finds when the foe he meets that he is not the bravest of all. Venom I breathed when bright I lay by the hoard my father had. There was none so mighty as dared to meet me in weapons nor wiles I feared. Glittering worm, thy hissing was great, and hard didst thou thy heart, but hatred more have the sons of men for him who owns the helm. So now he's saying that he wore it to fend off, but it was the very challenge of slaying him and slaying that ward and beating the ward that drew men to him. Fafnir spoke, I counsel thee, Sigurd, heed my speech and ride thou homeward hence. The sounding gold, the glow red wealth, and the rings thy bane shall be. Leave here, don't take this, even though I am dying and I cannot have it. Do not take it with you, because it will be your bane. Thy counsel is given, but go I shall to the gold in the heather hidden, and Fafnir thou with death dost fight, lying where hell shall have thee. Regin betrayed me, said Fafnir, and thee will betray. Us both to death will he bring, his life, methinks, must Fafnir lose, for the mightier man wast thou. So now he admits, he knows that Regin is the one that prodded him forward, or ultimately prodded all of the slayers to come in and attempt to kill him. And he says, now that you have succeeded, he will slay you too. And there's a little interjection there, and we know it because it doesn't follow the meter. He says, Regin had gone to a distance while Sigurd fought Fafnir, and came back while Sigurd was wiping the blood from his sword. And Regin says to Sigurd, Hail to thee, Sigurd! Thou victory hast, and Fafnir in fight hast slain. Of all the men who tread the earth, most fearless art thou, methinks. Sigurd speaks, Unknown it is when all are together, the sons of the glorious gods. Who bravest born shall seem, some are valiant, who redden no sword in the blood of a foeman's breast. So, one, obviously, the sons of the glorious gods, of course, the folk is what he is referring to, and he says, unknown when they're all together, who the bravest shall seem. Some are valiant, who redden no sword in the blood of their enemies. Regin speaks, glad art thou, Sigurd, the battle gained, as Gram with the grass thou cleanest. My brother, fierce in the fight, hath slain, and somewhat I did myself. So, and I helped. It's kind of, I don't know why I always view that stanza as you did great and fought my brother who was terrible, and I helped.
It's steak and bake, and I help.
Yes, and he puts his foot up on Fafnir. Sigurd speaks, afar didst thou go, while Fafnir reddened with his blood my blade so keen. With the might of the dragon, my strength I matched, while you in the heather didst hide. Longer wouldst thou in the heather have let yon hoary giant hide, had the weapon availed not that once I forged the keen-edged blade thou didst bear. So he's in essence saying he's been hiding in that tree line for a long time, but he's the one that forged the blade, the only blade that could kill the dragon. Sigurd spoke, better is the heart than a mighty blade, for him who shall fiercely fight. The brave man well shall fight and win, though dull his blade may be. Brave men better than cowards be, when the clash of battle comes, and the better the glad than the gloomy man shall face what before him lies. Thy rede is what it was that I should ride hither over the mountains high to the glittering worm, would have wealth and life if thou hadst not mocked me my might. So this part here he's saying clearly too is that yes, the bravery of a warrior is far better than the weaponry, which is kind of interesting in juxtaposition to warfare now being fought from cameras and buttons and such. But he's speaking about true warriorhood, and that even the dull-bladed sword is used well in the hardened heart of a warrior. But he also says that men should not be gloomy but glad, no matter what their fate lies before them. That they should, again, and this harkens back to the Halvamal, that a warrior must or should lead his life with happiness upon his face, despite what may come before him. And we find that a lot, I think, in military humor, but also to just the poetic humor of warriors meeting their end with a smile and a joke. I think is very entrenched in our the ethos of our society. So he said, "You did mock me, though," and that's something that that happens in the Volsunga saga. Regin mocks him and says that he's not strong, or he might be too scared to fight this dragon. So that's what he mentions here is thy rede, R-E-D-E, which is counsel, or when you're conversing with each other. Thy rede it was that I should ride hither over the mountains high, to hear to the glittering worm, would have health and life, if thou hadst not mocked me that night. If you hadn't have prodded me, I would not have known of the dragon to come and slay. So then Regin went up to Fafnir, the dragon, cuts out his heart with his sword that was named Rithil, and then he drank blood from the wounds. And Regin said, "Sit now, Sigurd, for sleep will I. Hold Fafnir's heart to the fire, for all his heart shall eaten be, since deep of blood I have drunk." And this sets a precedent as well, because soon we're going to find out the power of the blood. And Sigurd is going to find it out. But Regin is the first to quench the blood down. And he, in essence, is gaining that. But even he, still being crooked, still being cowardice, the blood doesn't help him enough, because that's the point being reiterated is the better powers, the better sword, all of that falls short if it's not powered by a genuinely brave and noble heart. So Sigurd takes the heart, he cooks it on a spit. When he thought it was fully cooked and the blood foamed out of the heart, then he tried it with his finger to see whether it was fully cooked. He burned his finger and put in his mouth. But when Fafnir's heart blood came to his tongue, he suddenly understood the speech of birds. He heard the nuthatches, a type of bird, chattering in the thickets, and the nuthatch said, "Oh, there sits Sigurd, sprinkled with blood, and Fafnir's heart with fire he cooks. Wise were the breaker of rings, I ween, to eat the life muscles all so bright." Then Regin lies and plans. He lays and the youth to betray, who trusts him well. Which I doubt that, but he doesn't seem to trust him that well. Lying words with wiles will he speak, till his brother, the maker of mischief, avenges. So the birds are saying that, here's this young youth. He just trusts this person, but he is going to kill him.
So first, it is awesome that Svan is making voices for each of the characters. That entertains me. Don't you dare stop. You are obliged now to continue. Also, Rithil, the sword of Regin, I looked up the name and I can't find its Old Norse meaning. Its modern Icelandic meaning is it's like a piece of wood that's used to tie up nets. That's the best I can get on it. I tried to look it up because I find that interesting. Again, names matter.
Yeah, and I wonder too, because there is connection. The net, Otar, there's the net that they use to take the dwarf that hides the gold.
And again, this guy's shifty and is about weaving stratagems and such. So I think there may be something to that as well, but it's just kind of a point of interest.
Yeah, I was looking for it over here and I can't seem to lock it in. But yes,
R-I-Eds-I-double-L, I think.
Yeah, it just the sections on the left don't always link up with the right. So I was looking in the paragraph to see where it is, and I can't seem to find it. Yeah, it's not. Rithil is not there.
Oh, it's funny because it's just got Sigurd the Kvav.
Yeah, and then you got 31, and then in the section there underneath it, it doesn't mention.
Okay, but it does underneath say it means swift moving.
Oh,
and
in the annotation,
calls the sword serpent.
Ah,
Which again, I'm curious where they're taking that from. I don't see it over on the side either. But that's a fun aside or rabbit trail for folks to go down.
So the birds speak in their voice. Sorry, it's the storytelling that comes out on this. But and then a third bird speaks and says, "Less by a head, let the chatterer hoary go from here to hell, then all of the wealth he alone can wield, the gold that Fafnir guarded." So he's saying he could also turn the tide, and then, or that Regin's motive is to kill the slayer of the dragon to take the gold for himself, but he could turn it against him. And the fourth concurs. He says, "Wise would he seem, if so he would heed the counsel good we sisters give." And that's an interesting point there as well. We were talking about the Nornir, and the idea, even though they go into 4 birds, but the point of it is the sisters, the usage of the feminine, clearly right there is a speaking of the power of destiny and the power of laying out prophecy through the feminine. And they say, he would be wise if he listened to us, and then he would live and be able to take the gold for himself. If he only understood us. Of course, the dragon's blood has given him that ability. So he's wise would he seem, if so he would heed the counsel good we sisters give. Thought he would give, and ravens gladded, there is ever a wolf where his ears I spy. So in other words, he will feed the ravens, he will feed the wolves. And I wonder about this too, because the actual the birds in the stanza, I wonder if it's just speaking of birds noting an alarm around wolves and ravens, or if that one was specifically culturally understood to be a sign, like when you hear them going off, there's a wolf nearby. But the correlation of him gladdening the ravens and that whenever they speak or whenever they chirp, there is always a wolf near, and they're speaking clearly about Regin being the wolf. But yes, and down in the bottom, I saw the annotated part said it's very similar to where there is smoke, there is fire. So wherever there is an alarming bird, there is a wolf.
So guys, this is dumb and should go without saying, but because me and Svan both didn't do it on a couple of things, if you're reading volusbau.org, they've got cool translator notes in orange at the bottom of the page, and they really do add a lot. Sometimes I get going with the story and I'm just listening and doing other things, and I forget to look there first, but it's pretty, in most of the things we've read, it's pretty rich in like little bits and pieces it adds. So I would encourage everybody to kind of take a look at those.
So the birds continue on. They say in 36, less wise must be the tree of battle. The tree of battle is a kenning for a warrior. Less wise must be the tree of battle than to me would seem the leader of men, if forth he lets one brother fare, and when he of the other the slayer is. Most foolish he seems, if he shall spare his foe the bane of the folk. There Regin lies, who hath wronged him so, yet falsehood knows he not.
That's an important piece of wisdom that I think rings true today. Maybe not quite as much as it did then, but certainly. And I think this is, a commonly referred to in epic poetry thing, but there is the very high on the list of priorities is avenging kinsmen. And so if you kill one guy and he's got brothers or he's got sons out there, you keep one eye open, because there's going to be people out there that are going to, for the rest of their life, be looking to get vengeance on you.
Well, and also too, to take the youth, the warrior, and give him a weapon to slay his brother. That's a lesson maybe that Sigurd is not quite old enough yet to understand the gravity of it. But then the birds are saying he will get his vengeance for
well, and that's the other thing. I didn't slay my brother. You slayed my brother, Sigurd. I just told you how you might do it if that's something you wanted. I didn't know you were going to do it.
I'm going to forge the sword.
Yeah, there's a yes, there's a
I gotta get vengeance now.
Playing with technicalities and stuff at play here. So
yes. And he also says it's very much like, don't lie amongst snakes. Don't make friends of your enemies. And here Regin is lying down. He's sleeping, or he's looking like he drinks from the blood, so he gains the power that his soul can achieve, even though it's very crooked and has got as many holes as it in as a thing with a lot of holes in it. No, what is it? A colander. Yeah, he's got a soul like a colander, and all of that stuff's flowing through it. Sigurd gets just a taste, and suddenly he realizes the guy that's sleeping behind him, or pretending to sleep behind him, is not he's not weak. He is very much an elevated threat. And the seventh speaks. Let the head from the frost-cold giant be hewed. Now here in this poem, he is clearly referred to as a Jotun, or of the Jotnar, as nomenclature, but nowhere else is that really ever mentioned as to whether they're clearly not just mortals, but no one in the story really is. But they say, let the head from the frost-cold giant be hewed, and let him of rings be robbed. Then all the wealth which Fafnir was shall belong to thee alone. And then Sigurd says, standing swiftly, not so rich a fate shall Regin have as the tale of my death to tell. For soon the brothers both shall die, and hence to hell they go. And he turns around and he cuts off Regin's head, because Regin was standing right behind him. Sigurd hews off Regin's head, and then he ate Fafnir's heart and drank the blood of both Regin and Fafnir. Then Sigurd heard the nuthatch say. So it's never mentioned before, but I think it's worth noting that perhaps the reason why it was mentioned, that Regin is not a human, but a Jotun that is working in service of the king. He's the smith who's learned from the dwarves. And it is worth noting that Jotun, even though its etymology is often quoted as the consumption, which is true, the usage, I wonder, in my observation, seems more akin to eldritch, or to be of the elder, or to be of the old, of the time, more associated or connected to Ymir. But in so doing that, he then drinks from his blood as well. Sigurd does. And he's not drinking from the blood of a human. He's not a vampire. He's drinking now from this ancient being who his brother was a shapeshifter who could turn into dragons. His other brother was a shapeshifter who could shape into a giant otter. and his father was the one who was able to know and find and locate where the treasure of this ancient dwarf is.
I'm gonna still count it as vampirism.
Because
Because a guy, he's talked about like he's a guy at all the other instances here.
That's why I think this poem specifically notes it.
Mm-hmm.
And to make it different, to make it so it isn't that way. But yes, in every other iteration, he's the smith, and his brothers just happen to be really good at magic, and he's just not. So he gets sent off to dwarf school to, learn how to smith instead. You're never going to be a shape changer like your brother. No. So I digress. So he cuts off his head, and the nuthatch says, "Bind, Sigurd, the golden rings together. Not kingly is it aught to fear. I know a maid, there is none so fair, rich in gold if thou mightiest get her." So now the prophecy continues. And of course, this poem is written with retrospect towards the greater poem. But it adds another level of depth that emphasizes that Sigurd knows or learns of his wife to be, and if he's 15 now, he learns of his wife to be, and not only that, he learns of the love that he will also have with a Valkyrie.
So this is kind of, and I mentioned this when we got to this point in the Volsunga saga, but it's worth noting on the hero's journey and the progression of average dude. Okay, so when you get the final orb on your altered beast thing and you become your like ultimate form,
Yes.
one of the things in the ascension to kingship, which is very much what the Rigsthula talks about. It talks about the ascension of Aryans from the most base thrall all the way up to the young king. And one of the things that happens at that level is the understanding of runes and the and various warrior proficiencies, but also the understanding of birds. And that's a magic that happens here when he, tastes the blood on his finger. All of a sudden he can hear what these birds are saying. And he's aware of all these extra things. All of the mystery of this, I don't claim to have the full answer. I've yet to sup on the heart of a dragon or the blood of a shifty dwarf giant creature thing. But when you tap into that primal, very ancient wisdom, things happen to where you are aware of subtle things you might not otherwise know. And one thing that I do count as a blessing that I find really interesting and that we make note of a lot, and it's trickier when you do bloat inside of a Hoff because you don't have the same elemental things around you as you do when you do things outside. As much as I'm the guy that wants to, increase our worship in Hoffs, I do appreciate some of the really special things that happen when you bloat outdoors. And I think there's different ways they show in a Hoff. But one thing that I do notice very often when we do a particularly well-received bloat or there's special things afoot, I notice a lot of interesting bird sign. It's not just during bloat. Sometimes it's before or after bloat, but there is a connection between the interaction of birds and the divine being present in things that you do. remember one time in when I lived in Palmer, Alaska, we did forget the occasion of it. It was in the winter. We were getting ready to do bloat. We had everyone over to my house and we were getting ready. And I mean, bald eagles are not uncommon in Alaska, but they're usually not something that's like in your yard. They're by the river, or you may see one like flying, but usually around rivers and stuff. They're not really scavengers. They don't typically feed out of dumpsters or whatever. They get fish out of rivers, and you find them in that kind of an environment very often up there. But in my driveway, there was an eagle that came and landed on the ground in my driveway, which is also odd. I see them in trees and I see them flying, but growing up, we didn't see them on the ground a lot. One landed in my driveway and was much closer than eagles usually let you get. It was looking at us as we were getting ready to go in and do bloat. And when it was like, okay, guys, time to process into the circle, the eagle flew up into the tree, and the tree he flew into was our ritual tree where we'd leave our offerings, where we would, where we kind of direct our focus. If we had to, pour out the mead or leave food that we'd left as an offering, we'd put it at the base of this dogwood tree. And we'd go out in the circle, and this is kind of our ritual tree that we'd focus on. And so he flew up into the tree and he perched there. And he stayed there all through us, doing bloat and getting loud and doing our thing and doing our ritual. He stayed exactly as long as bloat was. And when bloat concluded and we went inside, he flew off. And it was unlike any other interaction I ever had with an eagle, but it was really special. We also get a lot of interesting bird sign at Odenshof. And again, not always, but when it's particularly auspicious, I notice that.
And we get the turkey or the vulture buzzard. They fly up high and circle around as if they're having fun on the wind right before the storms show up. It's almost clockwork now. You see them spinning around and kind of coasting, and then they disappear, and then the clouds and the rain. Okay, so back to it. They're still speaking. They say, "Green the paths that to Gyuki lead," and it's worth remembering that Gyuki is the father of his future wife. So the king that he must find is Gyuki. And his fate the way to the wanderer shows. The Dodi king a daughter has, that thou as a bride mayest Sigurd buy. Another then spoke, "A hall stands high on Hinderfjall, all with flame, it is ringed without. Warriors wise did make it once out of the flaming, the light of the flood. On the mountain sleeps a battle maid, and about her plays the bane of the wood, fire. Ig with the thorn." Ig, of course, Lord Odin, as in the same with Yggdrasil, but it's mentioned.
The terrible one.
Yes. Ig with the thorn has smitten her thus. For she felled the fighter he fain would save. She made a wrong call and went against his will. So he put her to sleep. There mayest thou behold the maiden helmed, who forth on Vingskornir rode from the fight, the victory bringer, her sleep shall not break. Thou hero's son, so the Norns have set. Sigurd rode along Fafnir's trail to his lair. He found it open. The gate posts were of iron, and the gates were of iron too. were all beams in this house, which was dug down into the earth. There Sigurd found a mighty store of gold, and he filled 2 chests full thereof. He took the fear helm, the helm of awe, and a golden mail coat, and the sword, Hrotti, and many other precious things, and loaded Grani, his horse, with them. But the horse would not go forward until Sigurd mounted on his back. So despite placing all of that, Sigurd would not, Grani would not refuse to give ride to the rider, which again is just such a, it's re-emphasizing Grani as being the horse of horses. Is every warrior in the hall may have had a situation where they were loading their horse up and the horse just refused to let him ride. So, but not Grani. Grani's like, no, I'm not gonna go a step forward until you get on. And he mounted on his back. And that brings it to end.
Thank you for that, Svan. It's not a long poem, but I think that it's rich in, I don't know, cool nuggets that I think are really important.
It's an espresso kind of concentration.
Well, it really is. So much of the Volsunga saga is about other things, but he's Sigurd Fáfnismál. His claim to fame is he is the slayer of Fafnir. And this talks about that incident in detail and really, teases out some important points of it. So we do have questions this evening. Not a vast abundance, but questions nonetheless. What do we got?
Well, there was a question that just kind of came in. It's not, I don't think it's but Lana K said, this is a bit over my head. Could someone recommend a good book for a beginner? Someone who doesn't know much about our gods.
Lana, first, I saw your thing. Thank you for joining us this evening. Absolutely will recommend books and stuff. If you want, though, take a look over past streams. We did a whole series on this specific story called the Volsunga saga. I want to say we did that about 2 months ago. So if you want to take a look at that, it might help tease some of it out. The Volsung saga is what you would find it under normally. That would tell you about this story in specific. What do you have for recommendation?
Well, I was going to say, this, just to bear in mind for her too, we're going into the poetry of a very large corpus of lore, but to go back as what you said and look at some of the earlier poems that are spoken of the gods, the Halvamal, the Vola.
If you have time in the gym, or if you have long drives, if you are perhaps a long haul trucker of sorts, we tend to do these long episodes, but if you look back over it, we do a lot of lore episodes. We're currently in the Poetic Edda, and I feel like Svan and I have been doing Poetic Edda stuff for a year or more. But it's cool. We're going over a lot of things. Any of these episodes might be helpful or at least fun for you to look into if you want. But any copy of the Poetic Edda is going to kind of give you a lot of the basics. If any of this feels, I don't know, hard or awkward to get into initially, don't fear. I think that we all have that reaction going into it because it's not written as like one cohesive holy book like the Bible or the Quran or something like that. It's a collection of...
What do the Mormons call theirs?
The Book of Mormon.
Oh, the Book of Mormon.
Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ.
I brought that up.
No, I say that I'll get into that here in a second too. So, yeah, but there's a lot of cool things. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer anything or help direct you. But all of us, when we start out, you just got to kind of jump in a little bit. And the more you read of the lore, the more you notice connections and you notice things that you're familiar with. And it'll make sense more. I've been telling you about the primary sources. Svan may have some suggestions on other stuff that's kind of, I don't know, easier or more accessible.
I was going to say start at going to the website and looking at our True Logmail. And then the best part about that is because, again, sometimes it throws people off when they see Old Norse words, but you can copy, paste, and go and search, and gain insight by going down the rabbit holes in that sense. But
also,
very clear about it.
Don't be intimidated. Lana, I don't know you, but assuming you look like the rest of us, these are your gods. These are your stories. They will connect and they will feel good and feel like coming home. You've just got to kind of take the dive into them. We'd be happy to help you on it. If you don't look like the rest of us, still really interesting. And there's a lot of other study tools to kind of get immersed in it. And there's different ways to approach it academically. But yeah, it's really interesting. And I'm glad that you are on the show with us today. Feel free to ask whatever questions you like. And thank you for joining us. I mentioned something where Svan got me on the Book of Mormon thing. So my daughter and I go to this park that's really close to our house often, just about every day. We'll go there. I'll read stuff, do some AFA business, and she'll run and play with the other kids. And there is a duo of Mormon missionaries that ride their bikes through the park, and that's part of their missionary territory that they're assigned to preach in. One of the things I've been trying to do more and get better at is to engage folks in that kind of a conversation instead of, it's always easy to just kind of blow it off, or like, oh, I'm busy, I got something to. Instead, I'm just, hey, sure, let's talk. I'm sitting at the park, sit down, let's have a conversation. We've had really cool, about 3 times now, they'll sit and talk to me for like an hour, and I'll ask them questions about Mormonism, and they will ask me questions about Asatru, and it's been a really nice experience, and I hope at least they are learning about our faith a little bit. I know I'm learning a little bit about their faith and where they're coming from, but it's been really interesting, and I'm glad I took the time to just like, hey, just so happens, I'm a Gothi and this is what I do. So it's worth doing. And it led to like some just nice conversation with a couple of, nice white kids that are trying to do something good. So it's nice to do that. And maybe they'll look at our website. Maybe it will inspire them to come home. Maybe it won't. But either way, it's been a good interaction and something I'm glad I'm doing.
I know that we have questions in the queue waiting. I did want to say, Scott Thatcher wrote, I wonder who would win in a fight, Surtur or the devil. And to be honest, the best way that I could explain this is that's like comparing apples to persimmons, but someone's calling the persimmon a tangerine. And what I mean by that is Surtur in our faith is and has not deviated. But the word devil, the word Satan, the Hasatan in Christianity has greatly morphed. And there was a time when the word Hasatan was utilized for the opponents of Yahweh, God of the Israelites, and that certain times they would place their sins into a goat and then place that goat up on a plateau to be devoured by the wild of one of the Hasatans that was called Azrael, I think is Azrael. And then it gets a little confusing because there's an angel named Ariel. So it gets wild, but the usage of the word Hasatan as an opponent, eventually becoming Satan as a a group and then eventually an individual. So the morphing of that and its correlation to the burning pit or the burning pit outside where it was called Gehenna versus what Christians normally view as the burning pit that's in heaven, that they, push people into, etc. That also has greatly morphed, but Surtur has remained. So I would say to your question, Surtur would win because the other is not as definable as modern Christians would like it to
and
be.
the shifty lawyer, opposing counsel to Yahweh or whatever.
Right. Especially in the book of Job.
Yeah, he's greasy and kind of shifty.
Sleazy P. Martini.
Yeah, he's not the devil in the shifty, the little hat, big nose, shifty sense is not really formidable against the might of Surt. The angelic, angel of light, Lucifer version, more so. But again, the Hebrew angels are freaky, multi-eyeballed beholder creatures that also are not as cool as fire giants with big flaming sword destroying things. So if they had to, my money would be on Surtur.
And I really think Christians are unaware of how much Greek paganism made the Semitic religion really cool, with all of its imagery.
When you strip away all of the cool stuff, it's really
slimy,
odd and foreign and greasy and not appealing to our sensibilities.
The book of Job, what you said, where he's just Yahweh or working on counsel and cross counsel against Job just to test his faith.
I object. So,
different house. That's all I'm saying. It's not even in the realm, Scott. Good.
No, I agree with Svan's thing. It's like an apple versus a tomato. I guess they're both technically fruits in some sense of the word. All right. So, more serious question. Hey there. Question for tonight's show. To what extent can someone associate with a friend/family member who is a dishonorable person without being stained by association? Is it wiser to distance yourself from such people, or should you try to remain near in an attempt to influence them to become better? Thanks. Svan, take first swing at that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Multi-layered. I would say first and foremost, because there's the mentioning of family. This is not so black and white. This is not inner guard, outer guard. This is blood, and you're dealing with that. And then on top of that, it depends on the situation. And I really hate to say that to you because it sounds like I'm giving a loose lawyery answer. But you also said friend. I would say family and friends are different. If you have a friend who has done something of great dishonor, especially to another friend, yes, you cut that immediately because your loyalties are your honor and you cannot differ. So if your friend, and you agree with the fact that they have been grievously against your friend, stand with the friend who was wronged and separate yourself from the one who was doing the egregious deed. I would say figure out, make sure, because again, a lot of people weaponize that too. You know what he did to me? He did this. And if you immediately, so having a wise head is good. But if you find out, if you witness, or you absolutely know that friend did something to another friend and you kind of sit in between, bad move. That's not a good look. The other is, though, if you have family members, there are certain things I would say, that are disputive, where there's arguments, or he took from me, or he abused this, or what have you. But there's other things that are clearly against the line, egregious things. I'm not going to go into it on YouTube, but those egregious things, yes. And that's the fate they deserve. If it's terrible, but there are other things too that I think you should ultimately not be so hasty to cut that with family. And there is wisdom in trying to steer them in the right direction. There is wisdom in maintaining a link to the pathway that they can have to come back home, to come back to the gods, to come back to their family, to whatever it might be. It's important at the onset to be upfront with them and say, you have done this. You have walked away from the gods. You have walked away from the family. You have walked away, and perhaps you can find your path back. Or I, am not going to condone what you did, but I'm here for you when you're ready to talk about it. I think that's a huge difference than kind of taking the fence and then saying, well, the only reason why I'm here is to kind of make sure that I can guide them in the right direction. So make sure you're not doing that. But I mean, that's pretty much all mine. I know, Alistair, you're going to have a much better take on this.
I appreciate you thinking so. We will see.
So it's in some ways and shapes.
Well, because here's the thing. And I know this is, kind of like Svan said what he started to answer. The unsatisfying answer is Asatru is about being Aryan. Being Aryan is about being noble. Being noble is about your agency as a man or a woman to make informed choices on things. There's not one and done, oh, this person is kind of dishonorable, cast them out. That's not the simple answer. The world is much more complex than that. You have bonds of friendship that you can enter into and exit out of with very little consequence, often, depending upon the degree and longevity of the friendship. Your family is a different story. You are associated with them whether you want to or not. A stain of ignobility upon your family is a stain upon you in one way or another, regardless of what you want to do about it. So the initial hit you take a little bit, and then you can kind of choose how to manage it. Your point is prescient about wanting to, but should you still be associated in a way that you can guide them back to honorable behavior? Sure, in the extent that you do that. What I would say is there's kind of a sliding scale of levels of dishonorable behavior that you can scale up or scale down your interactions on. There are interactions with friends to where you are deeply involved in one another's life, and they're invited to all of your family events, and they're like brothers to you. I would say that should become less the more dishonorable that person is. But keeping yourself available to help advise them to make good choices is a thing to do. I think that we all have a different place where we put that hard line to where you're beyond redemption, and you have the right to do that. But that kind of flexes on what the level of dishonor. I mean, did they steal something at Walmart, or did they, betray their folk or betray a loved one or do something truly heinous to harm someone? These are different levels of dishonorable behavior, and you can scale up or down accordingly. You should never be dishonest and approve of dishonorable behavior. That's, I think, fundamental. With your family, there are obligations that are functionally important to do within your family And then there's, hey, are you inviting them over all the time to come hang out and be involved in your life and your children's lives? If their dishonor is liable to affect the rest of your family, lessening that contact is advisable until they choose to regain an honorable path. But the thing is, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. They're going to continue to be associated with you and your family for the rest of their existence. Keeping the ability to persuade them to behave more honorably, I think, is always an advisable thing, to have at least the most basic level of communication open to where you can help bring them back towards something honorable, if that's a possibility. And again, there are things that are a step outside that are, they can never come back from. I think those might look a little bit different on where each of us draws that line. But like, for example, if one of your family, molests children or something, then at least where I'm at, they're done and you can't really come back from that. So I would no longer be associated with them in any way at that point. But there's other things to where I would not associate more than the most basic familial obligations, and encouraging them to try to get their life right. And if they tried to get their life right, I would choose to proportionally re-engage based upon their progress in that course. But without knowing the specifics, it's hard, and details really do matter in that circumstance.
If you jump to the bottom of our questions, there's a couple carry-on questions by a few people.
Let me see.
Oh, down here at the bottom, Scott asks.
There's a couple of them here, so I'm trying to figure out where to start. What if you're the one who walked away from your family because you joined the old gods and they are opposed to them? So that's an interesting question, and I appreciate you asking it. I would encourage, if you are the one who walked away because you wanted to worship the old gods and they did not, I would, again, I'm not in your spot and the details matter. How that happened matters. Did you walk away because of their opposition to the choice that you made? Or did you just cut them off because you wanted to pursue this new journey of faith that you're on? If you are the one who walked away because they are Christian and you are Asatru and you wanted to forge a new path, I would consider what all that means and how much you needed to separate yourself. I don't think that if you become Asatru, from your perspective, you need to separate yourself from your family, unless there's other variables involved that I'm unaware of. So if you're the one who chose to step away from your family, I would consider re-engaging with them as long as they can be respectful of your faith and the things that are your core values. But no, you shouldn't disguise your Asatru practice or be untrue to who you are and living authentically. You should be open and honest about what you believe and the gods that you worship. If you can do that and still engage with them, then I would encourage you to still engage with them.
May I,
of course,
bring up a point here? And I knew you were going to say it, because that is our faith. Our faith is about joining. And the Als Herugodi is saying you should maintain being loyal to the gods, but you should also try to make amends with your family, unless, of course, they spurn you for that. But remember the fundamental difference between Christianity and Asatru. Asatru would say you hold your troth to the gods, but try to rebuild with your family. But Christianity would say, no, I did not come here as a peacemaker. I came here as a sword. It's specifically from Jesus. He said, I did not come here as a peacemaker. I came here bringing a sword, and that sword is to sever the ties. They never, ever end the quote of that Bible verse. The quote says, I am here to sever the ties between the father and the son and the mother and the daughter. Basically, Jesus was a rabbi saying, if you guys want to follow me in my new way and your parents are still following the old way of the Pharisees, then I am here as a sword to cut that, and I'm the line in the sand between the old Judaism and the new church that he is trying to create, the new synagogue. So he clearly states it, but he's also, again, he's speaking to Judaic peoples. And so you have to take that into context, but that's a really interesting note. Asatru would say, be of your gods, return. But if your family is deluded in the Semitic faith from the Middle East and they have these notions, remember, their notions are that heavy, sword severing between families. They have no compunctions isolating the self and the soul to the afterlife, etc. So I knew, when I saw that and it like rushed in hitting me that's the kind of a stark difference between
unless it's irredeemably villainous, I'd always leave the door open for family, especially if there's kids involved and other people's kids and nieces and nephews and things like that. There's nothing you can do that truly opts out of your family. They are bound to you by blood, regardless of how you want to conceive it. So leaving the door open for reconciliation between perhaps their children or whatever might be the case, I think is valuable and a bit of an obligation familially. And then Scott asked, go ahead.
He says they are the Rainbow Hariri. And I don't know, but I'm assuming he's saying just of the Rainbow ilk. But
yeah, a lot of people are really confused and we live through really strange times. This rainbow globo homo thing is, it depends on how old somebody is. This has been really cool for the last 10 years. Before that, it really wasn't. Maybe 10 years from now, it won't be still. There's some stuff they can make progress on depending how far down that road they've gone. And again, there may be nieces and nephews involved that you could still be a positive force in their life depending on your level of engagement. Scott asked specifically, Alzheimer Gothi, what if a family member is gay? I'm making assumptions that you're talking about a male family member. I think it is different with women than it is with men. We all know that as men, once you voluntarily choose to participate in homosexuality, you can't really ungay yourself. With women, I think it functions a little bit different, but that is a choice that I think everybody has to make. And I don't think there's a wrong answer to it as far as in the broad strokes. If that is a step too far and you need to cut them off for good on that, I certainly understand that decision and am supportive of that decision made soberly and not made in haste or out of anger about it. I think also, though, and for a lot of people, you don't have to do that. I think the concern comes when there's kids involved and letting the kids be around that person unsupervised, I'd be really weary of, especially if they were same-sex children in that environment. But again, you can't completely opt out of these people being your family, and your relations with one family member inevitably affect relationships with a whole web of, mothers and grandmas and nieces and nephews and a variety of people. That is one where I would be very cautious in my dealings with that family member. And I would think that that would draw a line to where my level of closeness with that family member could never be what it would be if that were not the case. It doesn't mean there can't be some. I don't think that in our faith, most things are not an all or nothing proposition. But that would definitely cause the relationship to shift in a way that I don't think it could ever be the same as it was before they decided to make that life choice. So I think there's a lot of right answers to that, but each person's going to make their own, and as long as they're trying to be safe and not altering their core values. What I'd never do on any of these things is approve of the unapprovable. You know, there's things that are not acceptable, and I don't think you ever have to accept whatever. If your brother decides that he's a girl, you don't ever have to call him Susan. You can, that's your brother. If he wants you to pretend he's your sister, well, he's not. You don't have a sister, so you don't have any obligation of that. But again, that's a very strange circumstance that is a sickness of our time. And that's a hard one to navigate. But I think that as long as you're true to yourself and true to your principles, you can choose how much to engage with that person or how much not to. But again, I would always be very cautious, especially with children involved. The next question. What is the AFA's position on premarital sex from a religious Asatru perspective? Should sex only be within the confines of a monogamous marriage? Svan, what are your thoughts on this?
So I think we can kind of organize a two-tiered. I will talk about, I think more the Viking age ideas of this, and then I think it would be better if you addressed the church of the gods in our modern day that are building temples to the gods. So I'll kind of do the lore nerd back half. I would say it's really important when you look at old lore and asking yourself, how does Asatru, are you asking about how the Church of the Aesir today defines it and what its uses and etc., or are we talking about the way our ancestors did it? And again, that's the perception of very small slivers of lore that survive. But that's where I'll focus on that. That's my jam. So one of the things that's worth noting is anytime that there was premarital sex between a man or a woman, there was generally a huge push towards marriage after that. If the child was the child was coming, the signs of birth were coming, and the girl was showing, then it was really heavily and societally established that yes, they should get married, because now they are going to have blood offspring and so on and so forth. It was a little looser for men. There's not a lot that goes on that, but there's a reason for that. One, Norse society. Two, the value that virginity has in the society. So virginity was held as valuable, specifically in women. One, there's the mention that the Ausinjur Gevion houses the souls in heaven of women who are virgins. So that again shows that emphasis. The other point of that was because it was about character of the woman, that the other family, especially if they've gone through all the societal processes to try to woo, if the son goes there and he's sending her poems and doing all of this stuff, and then he sends his friend to her father so that he can arrange a point where he can ask them to, may I marry your daughter, and all of that stuff. That stuff was very, very important. And so entailed on the other end, it was that she wasn't sleeping with everyone, in the fjord, if you will. That was kind of like not a good look, and it wasn't met well. So chastity, unlike with, say, like the Vestal virgins of Greece, or when you get into Semitic religions like Islam and Christianity and Judaism, the vestige of virginity had societal power, but the gods were not coming down and decreeing things. What that tells us too is that the gods expect us to conduct ourselves in a way. And the Church of the Aesir, the Asatru Folk Assembly, it's in the name, so it's nobility. We should conduct ourselves nobly. But the other point I wanted to make was marriages under the age of 15 in our ancestors' time was considered strange. It was absolutely taboo. Remember how before I mentioned that most like young men that would go raiding and or would go trading were around 15 in the age, given the fact that life expectancy being in the 50s and 60s, 15 was the age that a young man was expected to join a crew and go abroad, cross over the ocean in a tiny little wooden vessel, and just do it, which is crazy to think about. But any woman, any young girl married under the age of 15 was seen as absolutely strange. That was not the norm. Is it different in earlier iterations of Germanic Aryan societies? They vary so much that I can't give a hardened answer on it, but it kind of lends to note, yes, the idea was that if you maintained your chastity and then got married, that is the best. If you don't, if you fall in love and you have a child out of wedlock, then society, both tribes, both clans want you to get married. The other thing that's really important is a woman that has a child out of wedlock is adding on responsibility to her clan. That was a big thing as far as being able to survive and having the resources to feed another mouth. So if a woman was to get pregnant and not have a husband or something of that nature to afford the child, then they were at a deficit. And in those climates, that's very dangerous. The other point of that is when women bring extra children after marriage, you're married, you have children, that's a blessing, that's a boon. The woman brings so much to the home, to the household, the weaving, the brewing of mead, the brewing of beer, and all of the things that women did then. And on top of that, adding children and, we know of love and the nature between it, but also from a societal standpoint, that was more help on the farm. So it's interesting that their society looked at a child out of wedlock was a deficit to her father. But when she went and married with a young man and had children, that was a boon to the farm of their household. So what that tells me is, again, there's a significance in those positions, but it's not written down. It's not proclaimed. It's not thou shalt. It's, again, it is the way in which they conduct themselves, give us the signs, but that it was also, there was some leeway. If you did have a child out of wedlock, then they would push you to get married. And if some guy came and said, I want to marry your daughter, and she's 9, the dad would probably split your head in twain, because that's being a weirdo. So that's kind of what I'm getting at, is all of these historical referencings have signposts that let us know that society functioned in a way. But there is no point in which, say, like Lord Odin comes down and says, that shall not sit where a woman who's menstruating sits. That's Semitic stuff, and our gods don't function that way.
So, couple things. Even back in the Viking Age, or the Archaean period, a lot of what we see is idealized as the best and brightest version of things for nobility. There was a lot of premarital sex happening. There was a young warrior society where guys are out doing stuff and they're on campaign and things happen. This is an issue that, again, in the Asatru Folk Assembly, we do not believe in equality. Nothing is equal. The world doesn't work that way. Guys can kind of go out and do what they do, and their buddies give them a high five, and it's all good, assuming that they don't bring back kids with them.
Or diseases.
Very different story with women. If you are a woman, your value is greatly decreased due to your, as the kids would say today, body count, in a noble situation. But again, it becomes a little bit different if you're dealing with second marriages or later in life relationships. We're talking about the young prince and princess. Then, yeah, the expectation with that is virginity, and on the woman's part. So that creates an interesting situation and something to be thought about. The other thing that's really important is some of these things change with the reality of the society you live in and where you're at. And ours is not a thou shalt not faith on a lot of things. On some things it is, but a lot of things have a great deal to do with whether your actions bring honor or dishonor to your family and your tribe and the situation that you're in. In today's world, virginity is a very hard thing to come by. People end up getting in marriages often later in life, and we are in a much more hypersexualized society. That's a hard thing to come by, and there's no hard, fast rule or fatwa on premarital sex. I think we all realize the implications of that, be it disease, be it unwanted pregnancies, be it, God's forbid, interracial dalliances with unwanted pregnancies.
Yeah, those are things that our ancestors didn't really have to.
Yeah, that wasn't a frequent occurrence. Maybe if men were off battling in great distant parts of the world, and then they didn't have to really deal with the consequences of that when they went home, that wasn't really a thing. In today's society, it kind of is. Svan's point's valid. If the family found out and there was stuff, they would push for the young people to get married. And so it would not result in dishonor on the family. We don't live in a world where that results in dishonor in the same way. But again, a woman significantly loses value when trying to marry a good man if they bring with them, the more baggage that they bring with them from sexual choices that they made, the less valuable that appears to prospective mates. Again, when people are very young, I think we have a lot of people that end up finding their forever spouse when they're later in life. That's unfortunate. It just kind of is the situation we find ourselves in. And in that situation, you're not going to find yourself some virginal 30-something-year-old woman unless something is really wrong with them or really wrong with you, or unless a number of things have gone very wrong in life. So there is no fatwa on premarital sex. I would caution people to make good choices, and especially on the woman's end, don't sleep with somebody that you're not prepared to have children with if something doesn't work the way you want it to. And I would also say that for men out there listening, avoid the purity spiral. There's a lot of guys out there now that get radicalized by things on the internet and get really strange purity spiral ideas that don't serve them well in the real world. And they end up being sad, alone, angry, and bitter.
Purposely designed to isolate.
Yeah. And those things, angry, bitter, alone, the longer that's the situation you find yourself with without engaging in the dating pool and trying to find a girlfriend and find a wife, the older you are where you're just angry and bitter that you can't find beautiful tens that are virginal and you're in your 30s or whatever, wherever you're at, that's not a recipe for success in your life. You need to be realistic and work with the things that are in front of us. It doesn't mean you should have no standards, but your standards need to be proportional to the marketplace and not to whatever idealized situation you've invented in your head or the people you follow on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter have conditioned you to think is the world. You have to function in the world that you live in. I know that's not the clean answer that people would like for the question, but it is the honest answer.
But those, yeah, and they're purposely designed to isolate. It's just like many of these young girls who, some of them are built like a college futon, and they're saying that they're going to have, 6'5" millionaires for boyfriends. It's perfectly meant. It's conditioning our people to isolate because of these kind of unachievable standards. But I did want to say there is one thing that Scott wrote. How's her go? Didn't nobility have harems back in the day, guarded by eunuchs?
Middle Eastern nobility did.
Yeah, I was gonna. Well, yeah, I wanted to expound on that a little bit
and
too.
stuff. No, we don't find that a lot in Aryan cultures, and I can't say we don't find it ever. But the times that we do find it are not just nobility, but kings. We find it the further we get towards the Mediterranean. We find that with some Greeks. We find it in the Roman period. But no, that's largely a Middle Eastern thing that makes its way into Europe, and people will find themselves in polygamous, kings will find themselves with multiple wives because they'll be involved in political marriages or marriages that solidify families in that sense. In the historical period, you don't find a lot of that when you get away from the Mediterranean. And it's still not the norm in the Mediterranean for nobility. It's the norm for, it's the sometimes for royalty. But again, those are marriages of state much more than this dude's awesome, so he gets a whole bunch of chicks. It's not, it doesn't function quite. And I'm sure that nobility in the day could have a lot of variety of ladies if that's what they chose, but that wasn't really something that defined our tradition or the character of our people. As a matter of fact, it's something that Tacitus noted about the Germans when he went away from the Mediterranean. And
they felt the need to only have one wife.
Is that it was remarkable that their nobility were husbands to one wife, and they had marital fidelity. amongst their nobility, much more than the Romans. And Tacitus's purpose in writing that was to talk about how far Roman society had degraded from their classical period and been infected by licentiousness from their intermixing with other Middle Eastern and Mediterranean, odd cultures. So I can't say that that never happened, but that wasn't the norm amongst the nobility of our ancestors at all. And it certainly wasn't, that wasn't even the norm amongst royalty. It certainly was not common amongst other nobility and wasn't a normal function in Aryan society for the most part. A lot of things are situational. Again, I can't say that that never happened or was unheard of, but we don't find examples of that very often. And where we do, they're precipitously closer to the Middle East and the Mediterranean. Even in the Mediterranean, they're, further towards the Middle East and less towards Spain.
And there's a whole thing that we've discussed in the priesthood about how much the Phoenicians, who are the Canaanites, influenced the Greeks. But Al-Sirigothi's correct. The Mediterranean becomes this liminal space with many other influences kind of changing the norm of the Aryan mindset, or it seems to act differently around the Mediterranean. We could point fingers at a lot of different things. But
in Los Angeles, you have white guys wearing do-rags, but it's not really our thing. It comes with proximity towards diversity.
Right. Well, that's an interesting point. Holy crap. Well, I was going to say too that you had said matters of state. That's what I was trying to point at when I was speaking before. Virginity amongst the folk was held in value, but virginity amongst the royalty was held in value for a very different reason. So there was the value of children added on or creating the possibility of blood feuds, etc. But for the royalty, they wanted to make sure that the feminine coming into their home did not have an illegitimate child of before who could make claim to the throne, etc. And so Al-Sirigothi is absolutely correct. There's a difference between state and societal love in these matters. I think that's something that we should all be very cognizant.
Yeah, and the concept of the harem proper with the eunuch guards and stuff, that's absolutely a Arab thing. That's not that's not, literally draw that picture in your head and it's dudes in turbans with the elf shoes with that's not ours.
Well, there's a question earlier on or it's in the queue about what movies would recommend, and this is making me think of The Adventures of Baron von Munchausen. And when they go to the harem and there is the Sultan and all of these beautiful women and then these kind of dumpy eunuchs that he's got inside of a piano that they poke with spears and he makes music out of it. If you have not seen The Adventures of Baron von Munchausen, you should absolutely see it. And they have a harem with eunuchs in it.
There you go.
In the Sultan's palace.
All right. So the next question. Oh, and I didn't acknowledge this when it came in at 6:40, and I certainly should have. Austin in Wisconsin donated $20 for Phrase Off. Thank you, Austin. We appreciate it. He says, Witan Svan, from a previous VNS episode, you said that one of your favorite movies was the 1958 Vikings. I watched it, and it was superb. Would recommend it to anyone. Are there any more movies with heroic or warrior themes that either of you would like? Thanks again. Outside of The Adventures of Baron von Munchausen, are there other films that you would recommend, Svan?
Yeah, one I would definitely recommend is Braveheart. Braveheart was a movie that I think I watched it 13 times in the movie.
Spoiler alert, it is a movie that is fantasy and not history.
100% fantasy. It is as historical as Sigurd or the Volsunga saga is historical. It is fantastical. In reality, I've learned a lot about Longshanks and have grown to respect him a little bit more.
Yeah, he was pretty amazing.
Not a bad guy in certain sense.
Stabbed an assassin with the assassin's own dagger when he was in the Middle East.
Yeah, so but what I am getting at is the overall mythos of Braveheart and some of the acting without speaking, and the body language in the movie is so groundbreaking in the way that it was done. And I think also more importantly is the nobility of love. I think that warriors who love is something that I find just admirable. And I think that any young man growing up, and I think that's why it hit me so hard and why I watched it 13 times in the theater, was because it just made me believe that there was so much beyond the material and beyond the self, that there was the love that you could have for a lady, that the undevotional, unwavering, just gut-wrenchingly powerful. I actually got upset at the character when he kind of turned towards the French maiden, but the time had gone, and that was part of his journey, was wrestling with the fact that he could not bring his first wife, who kept showing up in dreams and visions. He could not bring her back, and he was still a warrior and a man, and fell, to the attractions and the desire, but it was never comparable to the love that he first had. And I just, phenomenal movie. It's 3 hours long, but it is well worth it. That first hour is all the gushy love stuff that I'm talking about, but the rest of the 2 hours after is, if you want action, you're gonna get it.
And the gushy throat slitting.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
So I used to like Braveheart. As I become more a student of history, I would like it a lot more if it was set in a fantasy universe.
Yes, 100%.
Like, there's plenty that have good sequences. There's a lot of cool things to be said, I think, about 13th Warrior. I really liked the 13th Warrior a lot. There's strange things because Antonio Banderas is supposed to be an Arab and does some odd things, but that's also a cool movie. I mean, there's a lot of, we could go forever on movies that are cool. That
the fact that it brings a little nod towards getting people to look at Ibn Fadlan and the Rus is kind of cool.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that the overall heavy borrowing from Beowulf is cool. And there's a lot of really interesting things in it. And I also like just the way it's done.
I read the book.
Oh, there do I hear my father in such pop culture until it was replaced by the repetition of my mother may. They're like the two things that like stuck out so much. Vikings and that.
Yes, a lot of people think that's like a pre-existing thing. No, that's cool. The original, if it causes you to read both the Eaters of the Dead and Fadlan's accounts, are all cool places to go from there. I don't know. I could go all night trying to figure out or think about movies that have cool heroic or warrior themes that are valuable. I will let you know if one comes to me. What do you got?
I was also going to say the classics of Shakespeare, but specifically Mel Gibson's Hamlet is a really good movie to watch. It might turn people off if they're not into listening or trying to follow Shakespearean language, but the movie itself is phenomenal, and it's after the Viking Age, but it's still at the point where even though the Danish folk are Christian, they're not Christian. They're still the folk. The blood is not separated. It's just now all of this, espionage and backstabbing is kind of entered in, and Hamlet comes in and says, he's going to cut to the core of it, but then he tries to utilize insanity as a way to get through, and it has a lot of downsides. Ophelia kills herself, etc., etc. And finally, at the very, very end, it all comes to a head. That, I think, is a great movie about a warrior wanting to avenge the wrongful death of his father, and all because he notices that his mother goes into the arms of his uncle way too fast. Like, that's a great movie. Hamlet, and of course too Macbeth, which also has the weird sisters in the beginning, which is clearly the Norns, bringing it back full circle to what we were talking about way earlier in the show. So Macbeth, and by proxy, I would even say Akira Kurosawa's Throne of Blood. That's a Macbeth retelling from the Japanese perspective, which is an interesting thing. And also Hamlet, top tier.
All right. So when you join Asatru, do you receive a new name? So I'd like to make a point that I do think is significant, and this is not like being critical of the question, because I think it affects the answer to the question. You don't join Asatru as if it's a new thing. You revert to Asatru. Asatru is your default setting. So it's not like you are changing to become something else. You are getting rid of impurity and going back to your natural state, which is troth to our gods. So that in itself, I think, affects the answer to this question. Svan, would you like to answer this question first?
Yes. Well, the default setting comment, I hope Sierra gets that, because that's going to be a good one. And it is absolutely true. No, you do not get a new name. If anybody hasn't seen the interview between Asatru Gothi and the Twitter or X kind of personality, Adam Green, he makes mention of that. He says, "Oh, you have a very biblical name." And I was wondering to myself what he was expecting. Was he expecting Asatru Gothi to come in and say his name was Bloodborne Pathogen's son and axe wielder? Again, it just seemed interesting that he even brought it up. But no, you don't get a new name. Sometimes you find yourself in situations where you have local groups, kindreds, and perhaps you have some issues or what have you. But until you get that legally changed, that's not your real name. Stop, trying to go by something else, unless you change it legally. If your name is, what's that one guy's name? Asatru Gothi? Smurf Hat.
Oh.
Scott? It was Scott.
No, it wasn't. Hold on.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the jump right there, but
no, because it once it gets to me, it'll get to me.
But
I'll just scream it out.
Thorbert
Lindley or something. his name's Travis. Travis Lilly is the man's name. But he insists on people calling him Thorbert, and he gets really angry if you use his like real name because it like breaks the fourth wall of his like pretend or whatever.
Yeah,
It's
there's
like-
so much theatrics in his worshiping of the gods that he creates this character that he has to like fulfill, and his name is Travis. Now, if he changed his name to Thorbert legally, I could understand that to a degree, especially if he doesn't have some ties to his family. But if you're named after someone in your family, like Alziragothi said to Adam Green, the name has it's got significance, so I'm not going to change it. I'm not going to present myself as something I'm not, and it's just that simple. But on other occasions, I have seen where there are like someone who doesn't have familial ties. They join a kindred. They don't want to be called, and usually it's something wild like Nebuchadnezzar or like, I don't know, like some really Jebediah, some really crazy biblical name. And they want instead to be called something else. And I would always encourage to do that legally. And also don't equally go as ridiculous in the other direction.
So, you do you. No, that is not a common Asatru thing. Though I will say, in the history of modern Asatru, that was something that the first generation of people founding our modern practice would often do. Now, everyone didn't do that, but a lot of people did. And they kept their Viking name for the rest of their time and used it and whatever. I don't think that was ever the norm, but it was something that a lot of people did. And I think that it was a breakaway function from, rejecting the Christianity to try to embrace this new thing as wholeheartedly as they could. And people were just figuring it out. That practice quickly died out or became much more of a seldom thing. You have some people that changed their name to their, Viking name that they adopted. You have a number of people that maybe when they were learning about Asatru, one of the elders that they learned under would give them a name, and that stuck sometimes, became a nickname, and then kind of became default their name. I think those things happen over time, but there's no need to do that. And I don't feel like I have to do that. I don't feel like I'm not legitimate because my name's Matthew. That said, I wouldn't name my children Hebrew names, and didn't. I would encourage everyone to name their children name their children white people names.
Yeah.
And, I think it's valuable to name your children after family members that were important to you, or perhaps after heroes. But again, you can do a lot of that without passing on Hebrew names. Gothi David James, again, David James, was one of those early people. He didn't change his name to not be, the founder of the kingdom of the Jews. But he did a seminar at the first AFA event I ever went to, where he talked about naming tradition and how if you wanted to honor someone with maybe a Christian name or a Hebrew name that they had, you could kind of rework that into something more attuned with our folk and our heritage. You could take what the name, because names don't just sound nice, they all have a meaning. Well, what does your Hebrew name mean? What would that be? What would the equivalency to that concept or that idea be in a Germanic language, and then we could work with that. And so there's something to be said for that. But no, I think that it is what it is, and I think that it is very easy to look inauthentic or LARPy or to look silly when you embrace Asatru and then demand people call you, Ragnar Skull Splitter or something instead of, your actual name that you came into the world with. The other thing is names have value. Your name was given to you by your parents. You find yourself with decades of Hamenya built around your name and your identity in the world. Casting off your name and embracing a different name, there is a metaphysical thing that happens with that. So that's something to consider. But no, I don't advise that people change their names to some kind of a Viking name. That's not a thing. That's not something most people do. That is a very rare thing that you might still see today, and it would be a very odd thing to see to somebody, under, before their mid 40s, I'd say.
I would, anybody who's interested or if they're having children, I would deeply recommend that you go to the website called Behind the Name. It is a very good website. It breaks names up into different groups very clearly, concisely. It has Nordic and separately Germanic, it has Anglo-Saxon, and it gives the meanings of the names. It is where, well, it's not where, but it's substantiated my reason for naming my son Eldred, which is an Anglo-Saxon name, and not an Icelandic name. Like, people might have some sort of bone with that. Why didn't you name him Icelandic names? And my daughter's name's an Etruscan name, to be honest. But there's reasons behind her name as well. But yeah, I just saw that I named my son Ivar, and I immediately went to Behind the Name to look it up. And there's Gaelic equivalencies for Ivar. There's a lot of different ones. And the root of it is Ir, the YR, like the rune, the yew tree, the Ir rune or the Ir dollar that Uller lives, and Heir, a warrior. So it's a bowman. The yew tree warrior is no doubt a kenning for a bowman. Or a spear. Well, no, a spear was ash, but yew trees were specifically used for bows.
There you go.
Yeah.
While we're on it real quick, I would point to don't name your kids or your pets after the ICO.
Yes.
Yeah, don't do that. That's also something that Gothi David James was talking about at that very first thing that I went to. That's not trying to call anybody out. People, you find yourself in the situation you find yourself in. But
It sucks.
That's not a practice that I would emulate. I don't think that's something to do. It's certainly not something our ancestors did. What Gothi James pointed out at the time, though, was that if you wanted to include the name of a god in the naming of your child through some kind of special dedication or whatever, there was a lot of compound names that our ancestors would do. Thorstein, Thorbjorn, Thorolf. There's a lot of different ways to do that still honors the god or goddess that you want to honor, but that isn't inappropriate. And I don't think that a lot of people do that intentionally to be blasphemous, but it's not a practice that's appropriate to continue or to keep doing. So it's nice to find a respectful way to do that.
Yeah, and even our ancestors, they seem to not. That's why they did the compound names.
Yeah. So there's a way to honor the gods with your naming if that's something you want to do in a way that's not a one-for-one direct naming your kid the name of one of the gods. Today, my great aunt Lillian passed through the veil. She was 97 and a Christian her whole life. Do I honor her during bloat? That might be a little, again, just nomenclature things. Bloat's not typically something that we honor ancestors through, except for at like a Disir bloat or an Alfar bloat. But yes, you should honor her. She's one of your ancestors. A lot of our, there is one generation of our ancestors that we shouldn't honor because of the fact that they are Christian. And that's the generation that broke from our gods. All the generations since then, that's what they were most often born into, the only thing they knew, the best that they knew to do during their time. And while it's sad that they didn't come home to the Aesir in life, I hope and assume that's been rectified on the other side of the veil. And as long as they were, your family who were people that are worth honoring otherwise, I would absolutely honor them and raise horns to them at Symbol and, perhaps call upon her during a Disir bloat. But yes, you should absolutely do that. All of us, the vast majority of people that get hailed during the ancestor round of Symbol were Christians their entire life. Some of them were, priests or pastors or whatever else. So please don't let that be a bar for you to honor your ancestors, again, outside of that first generation that forsook our gods.
Christianity has stated that it is a sword that separates. Asatru does not. We encourage you to.
And the thing is, things are real or they're not. After death, things get sorted out, and I don't think that, the magical rabbi gets to steal the souls of our ancestors. I don't think that's how the natural world functions. But who influenced how? Did Snorri just bring Greek-influenced myths into Norse mythology, a way of Hellenizing the Greek or the Germanic peoples? Svan, you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, we've spoken about this at great length, Witchmaster. I have spoken about it in great length to the chagrin of everyone else. No, I'll just keep it brief. The school in which Snorri wrote and comprised the totality of the poems, and the reason why it's called the Codex Regius or Regius is because of Simundur wrote the stories down. They were being orally told, and he was writing them down in Latin because the Nordic language had not quite decided whether or not it was going to continue using runic script or utilizing Latin lettering, or what exact Latin letterings were going to be used in order to express the sounds that everyone was saying. So they taking the oral tradition and turning it into a written tradition is a big topic. But one of the other things is that all the classical literature taught at schools, and Snorri's no different. He went to Norway. He was a friend of the king, and all of the classic learning of the time always lent towards classical literature of the Greeks and the Romans. And what Snorri was trying to do was to equivalate our stories and have them brought up into everyone's minds as being equal with. And so the intricacies of poetry and all of that was going on was, again, it surpassed by the Mediterranean stuff. And he was trying to bring it back in. So you will find some parallels there. You'll also find some parallels to euhemerization, and you will find things that he attempts to state out front, so that way the church doesn't get its hackles up, and then he can keep to the really close. It was very, very, I don't think he edited a lot at all. I think it was very close to what was being spoken to Simundur, but there may be some filling points or presentation in between the poems, the actual prose, that substantiates that the Nordic Aryan was not much different from the Hellenic Aryan, and that they viewed the gods in very similar ways. And you could debate certain things, especially when we talk about the tripartite and all that stuff. And I'm not going down that hole, but I had to mention it for those who are drinking in the back. But he did some small amounts to equivalate the two. But I think he was doing it with the genuine sense that we're not much different, as far as that our stories and their stories ultimately source from the same place, the same peoples. But as far as him just like, you know, I don't know, oil, like olive oil washing the Norse myths is not a correct accusation.
All right. Hello, All's Here You Go, Matt, Witan Svan, and folk builder Nick. Can difficult deeds be an offering to the Aesir? For example, if someone were to quit smoking and dedicate the personal struggle to the Aesir, would that be a suitable offering? Thank you for all you do. Svan, what say you?
Okay, yes, it's nuanced. I do believe, I speak often at Thorsoft, where I say, your bloat began the moment you stepped out the front door. You know, you gather your kids in the car, you travel across miles and miles of concrete to come and honor your gods. That's part of the worship. You are doing all of that because you feel that the gods are worthy of it because of all of that they have done and all that they have made for us. So deed is sacred. However, the unfortunate part of that is I've seen people abuse or twist that in ways. So that's what makes me reticent to say like 100%. You have to be very careful. But if you are proclaiming oaths and those oaths say, I'm going to quit smoking or what have you, and it might tie in other people around you, and if you fail, you hurt them, etc. So you should take great care in the deeds that you do. But ultimately, on a soft sense of that, if you get better, because of the gods, if the gods come, you revert to default settings and take on the challenges of your life and meet the future with a smiling face, and you change your mindset and you change your heart and you build better relationships with your family and you build community with your folk, etc. All of that is sacred. All of that is why the gods want us to come home. So I would say yes, the deed is a form of sacrifice, but I mean that in a very soft sense. When you get into the details, when someone says, I'm going to lose weight and I swear or make an oath or what have you, I think that stuff, you shouldn't go down that path so much, as you should attempt and keep moving forward and keep striving and keep working with yourself and the gods. That is part of what I think they're watching. They're watching us at the well of Erd in heaven and determining the worth of the folk. And they will mark you as good or bad, or truly honorable or noble or dishonorable or ignoble, based off of your deeds. So
yes, doing good stuff and dedicating that accomplishment to the gods is a way of offering.
Just that simple. It is true.
I mean, it is, and it kind of ends there. It depends on, there's people that want to formalize it in a ritual or do whatever. I believe very much that doing something good and then in your moment of spotlight for doing something good, dedicate the accomplishment to the gods, to the ancestors, to a hero, to somebody important. I think that's a nice way to honor someone. I mean, it's the same way that if you win an award and you go up there and you're like, this win goes out to my great grandma, Susie, big up Susie. That's a nice way to honor your great grandma. I think it's also a nice way to honor the gods, to dedicate an accomplishment to them. And I think that's a nice thing to do. I often say, especially this time of year when we're celebrating Sigurd, that we worship with our deeds as much as we worship with, offerings poured into the horn. We worship with stacking victories in the names of our gods and our folk. So I think that's very relevant and very, appropriate. How should one handle political disagreements within the AFA? I would like to think that all members are on the same quote unquote side, which is for the folk. Svan, what say you?
Well, I think no matter where you are on that spectrum, the priority of it is to be for the folk. I have met people in many different political, ideological orbits or gravitational pulls, from minarchist and libertarians to nationalists, etc. Met people from all over the AFA having different spots, some spots unquantifiable in their political stuff, but always pro folk. And that's the way it always should be. And any ideology or any political spectrum that is against the folk is not Asatru. It is, because Asatru is an ethnic faith, and anything that's against the ethnicity of the very people that the religion comes from, it is not Asatru. So within the AFA specifically, I think that is the case that works most often, is that everyone still, no matter where if they believe that we should have minimalist government or whether we should have more of an authoritative government or a monarchy, it doesn't matter, because they're always thinking about what is best for the folk. But when you have globalism, and when you have the degenerating of the family, and when you have tearing down of the Western civilization, or even I would go so far to say is Germanic ethos of society, that's not Asatru, and that should be addressed. That should be argued vehemently against, if it is against the folk.
So Svan mentioned the spectrum at the beginning, and I think that's where I would like to start. Don't be autistic about your politics within the AFA on stuff and purity spiral. It's really easy. And I say that not really half jokingly, because that's what I see happening. I say it, I guess, in a humorous way, but politics are downstream from religion. And I think one of the reasons that is not self-evident is we count a lot of things today as politics that aren't politics. Your core values are not politics, and we try to pretend that they are, and they're not. Politics, in a fundamental way, are about legislation or candidates. They're about means towards ends. There can be a great degree of approaches to the betterment of our folk through different means. It's the intention that matters a lot. Politics is shaped by the time and the environment and a myriad factors that don't necessarily have an overt right or wrong religiously. There are certain things, like Svan said, that are anti the gods, that are anti our race, that are anti the core nobility of our people. And those things, there's much less variance on the spectrum of what's appropriate and what's not in those cases. But I do think we need to extend each other a certain amount of grace, that there is a wide variety of different answers, approaches, and ideas on the best way to achieve nobility for our folk, dignity for our race, a future for our children. There are a lot of ways to go at that, and your views on that you may hold very, very strongly are not necessarily shared by other people, especially when we live in a time where we function with a variety of different truths out there. Unfortunately, we lack the transparency to know objective truth in a lot of things. So different people take their truth and their facts from different sources, and we often find competing facts that from each person's perspective look equally true. A lot of time, extend the grace that maybe the person you're arguing with politically just doesn't know. Also hold out that perhaps maybe there's something that you might not know. It's not fair to base your political assumptions or to judge other people's political assumptions based upon your political assumptions, because very often we're talking about two completely separate things. I think that's really important, going both ways and all ways, especially when you go perhaps at different parts of the country, perhaps generationally. There's things that a prior generation believes are true that you might know to not be true. Or there may be things that you think are true that other people in a different place and a different time, with their full best of their knowledge, don't believe are true or accurate. So try to extend grace with your brothers and sisters in the Asatru Folk Assembly, trusting that their heart is in the right place and that their goals are noble, even if you would choose a different route towards those goals. So yeah, it all depends. There's fundamentals that are hard-nosed, but there's also a lot of variance of, different ideas that are different approaches to a similar problem or towards a similar end. Last question of the night. What are your thoughts on Varg's writings on Norse paganism?
The Varg question. We haven't had one of those in a while.
A lot of people still pay attention to him. Svan Herul.
No. It's so strange when he says Svan Herul. So we've spoken about I think the name Vargur is very fitting for him to hold. He lives in the outskirts. I'm very glad that he's been bountiful. The gods have blessed him with good children, or many children, etc. But he lives on the outskirts, and in reality, that is the entirety of him. Is him living on the outskirts means that he kind of gives these points in, and I mean that's kind of about it. It's like the man yelling on top of the hill into the city about placentas. He's not involved. He's not growing in it. He's just making proclamations. And ultimately, when you dig deep enough, his proclamations are secular. He has said it himself. And I certainly think he can come back from that, but it would require him to step into the town and start helping his fellow folk in the town and in the country he lives in. But he's quite content on, screaming from the internet. And he has some interesting things as far as just notions and ideas, but I think they fall short on their isolation.
Yeah. I am not impressed. I don't think Varg has anything of value to offer. Varg is not Asatru. I don't believe that he is religious in any sense. Literally everything is some kind of a relation to his wife's placentas on things. That's silly. He lives off in his own little private enclave of existence. Looks like he has a beautiful family. That's awesome. But I don't think he has anything to offer about Asatru. He isn't Asatru. He doesn't practice Asatru. And I really, don't think he has anything to add to the conversation. I find his things to be, his takes are way too simplistic, and they're insulting in their simplicity, and they're also just wrong. Like, they're just fundamentally wrong on the face of it. I'm not sure why he's such a perennial thing that folks ask about or whatever. I know some people, liked his music or whatever, but I don't think he has anything to offer to the conversation. And I think, if anything, he's kind of a distraction from genuine and sincere dissemination of our faith to new people who are interested. That said, thank you everyone who joined us this evening. It's always nice getting to talk to you guys. Taking a week off there when Brandy did her part just lets me know how much I look forward to this every week. So it's been nice talking to you guys. It's nice spending the evening discussing our lore with my good friend Svan. I missed a question somewhere. I don't know where it went, but they asked why I was drinking out of the drinking horn this evening. It's because Svan gave it to me as a gift.
I didn't see that. Yeah.
Yeah, at Sigurd. And it's cool. It's handy, and it works really well for our purposes. But yeah, it was nice talking to you guys. I got something special next week to go over, a little slideshow about AFA history that I was going to do at Sigurd at Sigurdheim, but it didn't work out. We had some technical difficulties, so we should have it ready for you, and I'll invite some different AFA luminaries on to discuss it, and hopefully have a fun show for you guys next week. Until then, make plans to go to Baldershof for Freyfaxi if you can. Hail the Aesir, hail the folk, hail the AFA. Remember, victory never sleeps.